Game of Thrones escape game. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 Darren's Friend. Ask your friends to introduce us to Governor Illyrio. Ian guessed. No. Darren shook his head. Illyrio is a merchant, but he is also a governor. Ordinary members of the guild have no right to see him. They can only see Illyrio through the monthly banquet. So, I can try to ask my friends to see if he can give us the opportunity to attend the banquet. Can't the attendees bring servants? If they are more noble attendees, of course, but ordinary guild members or captains who apply on their own can only bring one female companion at most. Male companions are also fine. Pentis is not as serious about this issue as Westeros. So your friends are just ordinary guild members? Ian was a little disappointed. They may still look at me because I'm the son of the Lord of Seagull Town. That's the thing. We need to see the governor, so I hope you can do me a favor and give us the qualification to attend Governor Illyrio's banquet in the middle of this month. Darren made his request to his friend. I'm sorry, Darren, Terrabane said, sitting on a sofa filled with horsehair and velvet, with a haughty look on his face. I'm afraid I can't help you. The place for this banquet is also very important to me. It involves the distribution of shares of many trades in the city of Pentis in the next month. It's just 1 or 2 batches of cheese. Darren certainly knew what business Terrabane was in, and I need this opportunity to meet my king, he explained. Pay attention, Darren. You are not qualified to talk about cheese in this tone now. Terrabane imitated Darren's tone when he talked about cheese just now in an extremely exaggerated way. I tolerated your arrogance in front of me before. That's because you are the son of the Lord of Seagull Town. But now, Terrabane shrugged. Seagull Town has been taken away by the royal family, and you, he said and glanced at Ian standing behind Darren. You are just. Terrabane paused, not knowing what he thought of, and directly changed the subject. And if I guess correctly, your ship is gone, right? Why are you? Darren was a little surprised. If your ship is still there, you can pass the qualification test of the governor's banquet by yourself. Why do you need my help? You have nothing now. Why should I help you? Terrabane tapped his fingers on the table, looking at Darren, who was becoming more and more embarrassed, leisurely. Ian looked at Darren's disappointing appearance, and he couldn't help but have the idea of slapping the stam cheese seller in the face with a golden dragon, and making him kneel down to offer his place at the banquet. But he knew he couldn't do that, because it didn't fit the character of Ian Rivers. In Ian's plan, he couldn't show any financial resources in Pentis. He had to show an image of almost no power in front of Illyrio, so that Illyrio could recommend him to Viserys' brothers and sisters with confidence. When they left Pentis and set out on the journey to Vis Dothrak, Illyrio would be out of reach. But before leaving Pentis, he had to hide his financial resources. Illyrio and Varys were both intelligence professionals, and Illyrio could find out everything he did in Pentis. Mr. Terrabane, Ian finally spoke up himself. I wonder what you need us to do in order to give us the opportunity to attend this banquet. Ian understood the cheese vendor's expression, and his eyes showed the words waiting for a good price. Don't deny it so quickly. You just told us from the beginning that this request was very difficult for you. Then you emphasized the importance of the banquet to you, and reminded Darren to recognize his current identity. Moreover, you held back your words when you were about to humiliate us. If I guess correctly, you plan to wait until we are disappointed and ready to leave, and then make a request to us in a tone of arms, right? Terrabane was stunned for several seconds. Then he put down his legs, sat up straight again, and looked at the young man behind Darren with a scrutinizing look, who he once thought was Darren's servant. I can see your anxiety, Ian said again, and since you are taking the trouble to do all this instead of asking directly, it means that the thing you are thinking of is either very difficult to do, or a dirty job that is difficult to do. And it happens that in your eyes, we can help you solve this problem. I have to admit that you are very smart. I wonder who you are? Terrabane forced himself to recover from his surprise. Sir Ian, I'm Darren's friend. Ian was not in a hurry to reveal his new vest, Oh, Taro Bayan swept away the arrogance on his face and replaced it with a very friendly smile. Sir Ian, Darren's friends are my friends. I do have a big problem here that needs to be dealt with, and you just happen to have the force to deal with these troubles. He glanced at the 4 knights around Ian and then looked at Ian and Wisdom. If you can help me deal with this matter, I will not only give up the quota for this governor's banquet, but also provide you with a sum of 50. Oh no, 100 gold dragons. How about it? Tell me in detail. Ian nodded. Of course, he didn't want to get himself into trouble as soon as he arrived in Pentus, but he really couldn't find a better choice for the time being. If he could get a chance to meet Illyrio by solving a merchant level problem, he could accept it. As for the reward of 100 gold dragons, Ian wouldn't look down on it, but having a traceable high income obtained in Pentus would allow him to spend money less stingily in the future. Why don't you bring chairs to the guests? You have no sense. Hearing Ian's promise, Terabane was delighted and quickly scolded his servants. Dirty work. Ian sat down on the chair handed by the servant and inexplicably thought of a person's figure in his heart. If he didn't need to change his vest, that guy should be the most suitable person to do dirty work, right? HU. The wind on the sea is very strong, and you are wearing too little. Dorian Black Falcon said to the mercenary beside him, but I didn't expect that you would follow us. Although I don't know what tricks you are playing, it's not easy to find a job that earns 60 gold dragons a month. I have no reason to give up such an employer. Yes, Black Falcon said, glancing at the mercenaries behind him. No one has any reason to give up. Sir Ian might have really worried too much, he added in his heart. Chapter 102 Slave Trade. In fact, it's not a big problem, Terobian said after a minute of thinking. I need you to help me get rid of a few people. Assassination? What the hell is not a big deal? Oh no. Terobian waved his hand quickly. Well, maybe it can be considered an assassination. But it's not the kind of assassination you think. The other party is just a small group of street thugs. You can easily find and deal with them. That's it? That's it. It's very simple, isn't it? Tell me the details. I'm curious about what kind of street thugs can make a businessman like you so troubled. Ian didn't believe a word of what Terobian said. Their leader is called Spearbreaker Silver, who is active in the dock area of Pentus. He has about 10 people under his command, and their combat effectiveness is not low. A small group of street thugs? A team of mercenaries? Ian asked back. He heard the system's prompt sound and knew that the optional task was triggered, but he didn't rush to see it. Ah, you are right to understand it that way, Mr. Terabane. Ian resisted the urge to slap him. If you really want us to solve the problem for you, you shouldn't hide anything from us. Yes, he is a mercenary, but also a street gangster, because he has been active in the port of Pentus, making a living by helping the bigwigs in the city of Pentus solve various problems. So, you are the problem that some bigwig needs to solve now? Oh, you are exaggerating. It's not like that. Absolutely not. Terabane quickly denied it. Well, no matter they are mercenaries or street gangsters, as a member of Illyrio's Chamber of Commerce, how can you worry about such a small matter? You offered us a reward of 100 gold dragons before. With this money, you can easily find a mercenary team of hundreds of people to help you solve this trouble, but you chose us? Why? That's me. Terabane wanted to say that I was giving you a chance to get the invitation because I felt sorry for you, but he quickly remembered that he didn't offer such a charity when the other party returned disappointed, but that the other party discovered his purpose. There are two possibilities. First, the mercenary team of Spearbreaker Silver is very dangerous. You can't find mercenaries willing to deal with them, but this possibility is very small. In Westeros, ordinary soldiers are willing to try to capture Hound Sander Clegane for 100 silver deer. Do the people of Pentus lack courage? Because as long as the money is enough, there is no mercenary who dares not take risks. So I'm more inclined to the second possibility. The power behind the Spearbreaker makes the mercenaries in Pentus dare not offend. Or at least no one in Pentus dares to offend the person he is serving now. Ian said with a playful smile. In other words, things are back to what I said at the beginning. You are now a problem that a big shot needs to solve. Terrabine was silent for a few seconds, and then he spoke again. The thing is, I have a smuggling ship. According to the time, it will enter the port almost this week, but my warehouse has been targeted by the damn spearbreaker. So, who hired the spearbreaker? Ian did not continue to listen to his story and asked directly. In fact, Ian had already backed down at this point. Terrabine was evasive, and lied one after another. It was obvious that there was a lot of hidden secrets behind his mission. Ian didn't want to offend any big shot in Pentos before meeting Illyrio. After all, there were still more than 2 months before Dany and the Horse King left Pentos in the original book. During this period, he had to stay in Pentos. No, it was just his own behavior. He wanted to make a fortune from me. So Spearbreaker is a street gangster, and he also engaged in smuggling, right? Do we look so stupid? Since you are so dishonest, I'm afraid our cooperation can't continue. Ian said, standing up. Talobane also stood up quickly, but then he realized that he should be fearless, so he sat down again. You need an invitation to Governor Illyrio's banquet. I must remind you that the banquet in the governor's mansion this month has been advanced to the Sirio festival, which is the day after tomorrow. If you think you can get an invitation from someone other than me in a day and a half, then please go ahead. Talobane said toughly. But who told you that we have to see Magister Illyrio as soon as possible? We have plenty of time to find a way to see Magister Illyrio before the Horse King arrives in Pentos. Ian said, and turned away. Ian's words were both provocative and true. Although he had not thought of a good solution for the time being, he was not particularly anxious. As long as he stayed in Pentos and held Darren's key, could he really not see Illyrio? He asked Darren to find a friend to help in order to save trouble, not to cause trouble. Wait. Talobane finally called Ian. I can tell you more, but you must promise to help me solve the problem first. Ian was still walking out and did not look back. Okay, I'll tell you the truth first, and then you can decide whether to help, okay? Hearing this, Ian stopped and planned to listen to what Talobane would say. After all, the final decision was in his hands. What he didn't expect was that Talobane seemed to have exhausted his imagination for making up stories, and he started with a heavy weight. My ship is a slave ship, Talobane said directly. Slaves. Ian joked. He finally understood why Talobane, as a member of the Illyrio Chamber of Commerce, couldn't even handle a small matter like smuggling. It turned out that the goods he smuggled were slaves. That's right. Talobane saw the shock on Ian's face and explained. Pentos has abolished slavery since it was defeated by Bravos, but in fact the upper class of Pentos still has a high demand for slaves. The nobles took off the collars of the slaves and pretended to make them free people, but at the same time made the slaves burdened with huge debts that they could never pay off in their lifetime. Because of the ban, the profit of the slave trade in Pentos is much higher than that in the Three Daughter City-state. While we are conducting normal trade, we occasionally bring a batch of good goods when passing through the slave bay. Especially the bed slaves of Yunque. They are proficient in the 7 kinds of spring crying techniques and the 16 body positions in the pleasure field, and are very popular among the nobles of Pentos. Since private slave trade is already an open secret, why are you worried about problems with your slave ship? Ian interrupted Talobane and asked his own question. Because of party disputes. Please, I know that many readers want to see the protagonist come to Daenerys as soon as possible, but in fact, as long as they stay in Pentos, the protagonist cannot do anything in front of Viserys and Daenerys. This will arouse Illyrio's vigilance, so Daenerys will still have very few scenes during the 2 months in Pentos. The second volume is called The Victor of Pentos. In this volume, I will fully present Pentos, which is rarely described in the original book. The end of this volume can definitely support the word climax. In addition, readers who especially want to see the characters in the play/original book or the direction of the original plot should be careful to order after it is released, because from the outline, before the protagonist conquers most of Essos and returns to Westeros, there will not be many characters in the play. The characters in the original Daenerys line should all appear. And the plot direction may deviate from the original book from the beginning, because there are too many variables, players. The latter part of this book should show more of the content of those parts mentioned in the original book, but not described in detail. I don't want to waste any reader's money, so I will remind you first. Chapter 103, Factional Struggle in Pentos. Because of party struggles. Terrobin said helplessly. Party struggles? Ian blinked. This was an unexpected answer. Because the original book only gave a few descriptions of Pentos from the POV perspectives of Daenerys and Tyrion, Ian knew nothing about the current political situation in Pentos. But Ian thought again, it would be strange for a city ruled by several governors and 40 noble families to have no party struggles. But do you really dare to say that? When it comes to party struggles, do you think I can get involved? Ian couldn't help but laugh. It involves party disputes, but it's not directed at me, Terrobin explained quickly. In fact, this is a struggle between the Bravos faction and the Volantis faction in the Great Council. Governor Sisito Morn, who has only taken office in the past 2 years, is recognized as a representative of Volantis interests. Most of the slave trade in Pentos is a business of him and his ally, Governor Teteros. And just 2 weeks ago, Governor Howcott, who had long been funded by the Bravos Iron Bank, suddenly attacked the slave trade. With the support of His Royal Highness and the Bravos ambassador, he launched an operation to thoroughly investigate the slave trade throughout Pentos. Perhaps you can tell me more details. Ian became interested. Regardless of whether he accepted this task in the end, it would always be good to know more about the situation in Pentos. More detailed things are not something that people like me can know. Terrobin shook his head. Perhaps you can ask Governor Illyrio in person later. In short, for us, this is simply an unprovoked disaster. Jardobeo and Wang Laoji fought and beat Ikizheng to death. Ian suddenly thought of this. The Dock Thug Spearbreaker is one of the vanguards hired by the Howcott family. He is a subordinate of the local boss of Pentos Port. He knows all about us small traders who have engaged in slave trade. I said that my problem does not really involve those big men, because Spearbreaker is just taking this opportunity to work for Governor Howcott to blackmail us, then pay up. You are a member of Illyrio's Chamber of Commerce. How dare he ask for so much? It is precisely because we are Governor Illyrio's people that he dares to ask for so much. All Pentos people know that the governor remains neutral in the party struggles of the Great Council. If we cause him trouble because of our private slave trade, Governor Illyrio will never be soft on troublemakers. Ian's eyes lit up, and his first reaction was to threaten Terrobin with this matter directly, forcing him to give up the invitation to the banquet. But he soon gave up this idea because he did not have any evidence in his hands, and the possibility of such a threat working was too low. And the reason why I can't let other mercenaries in Pentos deal with this problem is not because the Spearbreakers are so powerful, or because the mercenaries are afraid of Governor Howcott. In fact, I can't find reliable mercenaries at all. Most of the mercenary teams in Pentos have various relationships with major families. I'm worried that they will leak the news and cause trouble for Governor Illyrio. Aren't you afraid that I will leak the news? Ian asked with a smile. Oh, I think we have the same position on some issues, such as, don't cause trouble for Governor Illyrio. After all, you still have a lot to rely on him, right? Terrobin half closed his eyes and said confidently, you are really a waste of talent to be a businessman. A guy like you should sit in the Great Council you mentioned. Please don't laugh. Terrobin rejected the compliment, and then added, as long as you do things secretly enough, no one will suspect us. They will only regard this as part of the revenge of the Volantis party. So what is your final decision? When will your ship arrive? Ian asked instead of answering. This weekend, if the wind direction is right. That is to say, long after Illyrio's banquet? That's right. I can tell you clearly that we can't deal with the Spearbreaker in a day and a half, but it will be easy to deal with him before the weekend. So what do you mean? Terrobin understood a little. Give us the invitation first, and we will naturally help you solve the problem after we meet the governor. Don't answer in a hurry. Ian stopped Terrobin, who was about to speak. You know that what I said is the truth. If we don't make sufficient preparations and act rashly before the governor's banquet, we may not only fail to solve the problem for you, but also bring greater trouble. Terrobin didn't answer this time, as if he was weighing it. Just treat it as making friends. This matter can be the beginning of our trust building. Ian continued. Friend? After what happened just now, Terrobin glanced at Darren Grafson, who had returned to Ian and became a complete foil. Will you still believe in a friend like me? People like you will only make our friendship stronger, because being friends with me will always be profitable. Terminator raised his head and looked at the young man who was so arrogant. After a long time, he finally said the two words that Ian was expecting: deal. It was not until Ian and his friends took their things and left that Terminator slowly took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. He vaguely remembered that the last young man with such an aura he met was the Prince, Hassan Moharis. After leaving Terminator's home, Ian had been thinking about a question. Since he had already received the invitation letter, should he still help Terminator? According to Ian's usual style, it was definitely impossible to work after taking the money. But at that time, he was wearing the vest of Ian Lannister because he knew that this vest could be discarded at any time, so he acted a little recklessly. Now it's different. In his plan, Ian Rivers/Derry will be used for a long time. If his reputation is ruined, it may bring a series of negative effects, and standing up Terminator will definitely ruin his reputation. After all, the threat of Spearbreaker can only make Terminator bleed heavily, not his life. If he stands him up, then not only will he make an enemy, but his current identity will be completely tarnished in Illyrio's Chamber of Commerce. This is a result that Ian cannot accept. Let's check it out first. Ian thought of a compromise plan and sent the clever Squire Dornish Denzel to the port of Pentus, preparing to find out more about the Spearbreaker before making a decision. Chapter 104, Illyrio's Mansion, Part 1. Ian passed through the main gate with a guardhouse outside the wall, the red painted wooden door of the mansion, and the garden gate covered with a bunch of light green ivy, and then came to the garden of the mansion with many merchants, invited to attend Illyrio's banquet. Outside each door stood two guards wearing spiked bronze helmets. They were plump and round, and their faces were as smooth as baby's buttocks. Compared with the team of strong unsullied he met when he first arrived in Pentus, Ian doubted whether these eunuchs in the inner courtyard of Illyrio's mansion, who had obviously been pampered for many years, still had the most basic fighting power. Ian and Aaron were led by the maid to a seat under a cherry tree. As soon as he sat down, he felt his entire buttocks wrapped in thick velvet. That feeling was really damn hot. When sitting on it, Ian always adjusted his position involuntarily to facilitate the heat dissipation of this unfortunate chair. Fortunately, this chair was wide enough, so it was not a problem for two Ians to sit on it. This made him wonder, who are these chairs designed for? He soon got the answer. The host of the banquet, Governor Illyrio Patimus, walked into the garden from another direction and came to the host's seat. He was a guy with a yellow mustache, and he was extremely fat. His wide robe was big enough to be a tent for a tournament. He was wearing a silk product from Yudi, which was transparent, and showed his fat white belly and a pair of heavy chests. His breasts drooped so much that they looked like two bags of fat covered with yellow coarse hair. Seeing this, everyone stood up and raised their glasses to greet him. Ian was no exception and followed the crowd. Illyrio did not put on any airs. He also raised his glass in response. When he waved his hand, Ian was blinded by a series of jumping jewels. Agate, amethyst, jade, ruby, jet, jasper, cat's eye, tourmaline, tiger's eye, sapphire were strung into several bracelets and worn on his hands. However, with his image, these things did not make him look more noble, but instead gave him a hint of Navorish temperament. Illyrio began to speak, and the content was probably about today's theme, the distribution of some goods in Pentus. It was not difficult to hear from his words that he and his Chamber of Commerce mainly monopolize the trade of Pentus spices. In addition, he also had a huge share of several goods such as gems, dragon bones, cheese, and amber wine. Ian listened to Illyrio's conversation and was somewhat tempted, because judging from the funds in his hands, if he could really participate, he could make a fortune together. But in the end, he just listened quietly and did not participate because Ian Rivers had no money. Ian wanted to show the image of capable but without power, ambitious but without pattern, only wanting to take back Derry, hating the Baratheon family, and pinning his only hope on the restoration of the Targaryen family, a typical speculator. He wanted Illyrio to feel that he was useful and completely controlled by him, and might switch to the more promising Aegon VI at any time to serve the restoration of Aegon VI. To this end, Ian had to keep up his acting skills at all times. Fortunately, the organizer did not let Ian wait foolishly for the end of their discussion. After Illyrio finished his opening remarks, he asked the maids to serve wine and dishes. First of all, various kinds of wine were served in various silver cups, including sweet red wine from the Reach, summer red from Dawn, amber pentas wine, green me honey wine, golden arbor wine, and countless fine wines from Meereen, Kashkay and DC near the Shadowland, and even from the Eastern Ridgel land. Then came the dishes. The first thing that came up was a soup made of crabs and some unknown fish and an iced soup made of some unknown fruit. Then there were honey-cooked quail, creamed carrots, crispy suckling pig, lamb loin, wine-soaked foie gras, egrets stuffed with figs, veal patties soaked in almond milk, herrings cooked in cream, unknown vegetables mixed with sugar, stinky blue cheese, a few plates of snails and a platter made of meat from unknown animals, and a black swan with hair. This table of dishes overturned Ian's understanding of the recipes of this world. Originally, he had a basic judgment on the level of the food technology tree of this world through the best dishes in several taverns in Westeros, but it turned out that the people of Westeros were still too inexperienced in eating. The merchants were communicating in a friendly manner for their rights. They were arguing over academic discussions, and almost got into a fight. Ian and Aaron were silently enjoying the food on their plates, not saying a word, and seemed out of tune with the world around them. This attracted Illyrio's attention. After sending away the two merchants beside him, he took the initiative to walk in front of Darren, and his white robe swayed with the shaking of his body. "Darren, I can't believe you're still alive." Illyrio's tone was a little surprised. As the governor of trade and intelligence dealer, Illyrio was of course the first to get the news that Seagull Town was taken back by the king. "Sir Illyrio, since you already know what happened to the Grayson family, you must also know why we are here," Darren said respectfully. According to Darren's previous personality, he would probably question Illyrio directly the first time he saw him, but his recent experiences and Ian's advice made him calmer. "Yes, I have heard of it. The Graysons and Derry," Illyrio said. His eyes fell on the shield-shaped brown and black farmer's emblem on Ian's chest beside Darren. Ian was not wearing armor at this time, but wearing the gorgeous clothes he bought at the tailor's shop yesterday, with the Derry family emblem embroidered on it by Ian's tailor. "Are you from the Derry family? I heard that the two illegitimate sons of Earl Derry died in your rebellion." Illyrio looked Ian up and down. "So, who are you?" "He is Ian Rivers, another son of Earl Raymond," Darren hurriedly introduced. Ian had told him before that he was the legitimate son of Earl Grayson, and he was just an illegitimate son. His status was higher than his, so he should be the one to lead the conversation when meeting Illyrio. Although he didn't understand why Ian, who had become his de facto leader, suddenly became so humble, this arrangement was very useful to Darren. Of course, Darren didn't know that Ian did this just to make him say this introduction, so that he could give Illyrio a preconceived impression that there was no problem with the identity of Ian Rivers. Chapter 105, Illyrio's Mansion, Part 2. "I feel sad for the misfortune that has befallen your family." Illyrio withdrew his gaze. "Please allow me to welcome you on behalf of His Majesty Viserys. Please enjoy your arrival." As he spoke, Illyrio suddenly realized something was wrong. "Speaking of which, why didn't you come to me directly? Instead, you attended such a banquet?" Darren, who had originally given up accusing the Unsullied guards, could no longer hold back his anger when he heard Illyrio bring up this topic on his own initiative, and told Illyrio about his experience of being humiliated by the guards. "Well, I did give such an order." Illyrio seemed to remember something, and his expression was quite helpless. "I don't know why, but some time ago, several wandering mercenaries pretending to be Westeros nobles appeared. They made me lose my patience, so I gave such an order, and I must apologize for my negligence." What would happen if I told Illyrio directly about the slave ship of Tar O'Brien? Hearing Illyrio's words, Ian suddenly thought that I only needed to explain that we accepted this task in order to get an invitation to the banquet, so this matter should naturally be handled by him. But this will cause Tallow Bane to be in trouble with Illyrio. After Illyrio finds out the cause and effect of the matter, will he doubt my credibility? 2 sirs, if you don't mind, you can each choose a horse in my stable later. How about it? Just when Ian was struggling, Illyrio took the initiative to propose a compensation plan. The humble smile on his face could not hide the arrogance in his attitude. Obviously, Illyrio had already known about Darren's failure in the Riverlands and the loss of the ship. He didn't take Darren and Ian seriously at this moment. His so-called apology was to send these 2 wandering knights away with 1 horse each. Seeing this scene, Ian completely gave up the idea of telling Illyrio about the slave ship. Illyrio already despised him enough. If he couldn't solve a small dock hooligan, he might leave an impression of waste in Illyrio's eyes. Once he was judged to be of no use, it would be a fool's dream to want Illyrio to introduce him to Viserys. Well, since you 2 are only forced to attend this banquet, Illyrio beckons some servants. You can leave at any time if you wish. You can stay here temporarily. My servants will arrange your rooms. Please feel free to explore this house and the basement. Just treat this place as your own home. If you need anything, please tell my maids. They will never say no. Illyrio bowed slightly, but please excuse me now. I will talk to you in detail later. After Illyrio finished speaking, he returned to the group of merchants without waiting for the 2 to respond. Originally, today was also their time to discuss business. Of course, Ian did not stay here any longer. Instead, he and Darren followed the servants arranged by Illyrio to their rooms in this mansion. In the middle of the room was a feather bed with a thick and soft mattress. Ian sank into it as soon as he sat down. He rolled on it twice childishly, as if he was recalling the big bed in his previous life, then stood up with a smirk and came to the window. The golden sunlight shone through the shutters onto the mirrorish patterned carpet in the room. Outside the window was a circle of cherry trees, distributed around a marble pool. In the center of the pool stood a painted stone sculpture of an assassin. This reminded Ian of the players who were at the bottom of the leaderboard. Now that several days had passed since the first month's settlement day, the assassins who went to kill them should have succeeded, right? Closing his eyes and logging into the auxiliary system, Ian checked the emails he had not checked last night. 39th day settlement report. Current number of remaining players. 36. This number was even more fierce than Ian had expected. It seemed that in addition to the 3 players at the bottom of the leaderboard, many players and other meat grinders had also been killed or injured. Bounty mission to treasure hunt game Old Town has been completed. Just last night, the meat grinder in Old Town had ended, but the treasure chests in Volantis and Yedo had not been found. This was probably because there were too few players in those places, and the current players simply could not get enough points to buy clues. Judging from the difficulty of this planned task, the possibility of finding the treasure chest without clues is about 0. After confirming that there were no other emails, Ian exited the system and began to review the words he had prepared to deal with Illyrio's school exam. Suddenly, he heard a girl's voice behind him. Sir Ian, the girl's common language was a little unfamiliar. Governor Illyrio arranged for me to serve you. Ian turned his head and saw a beautiful blonde girl with a pair of blue eyes and a slim figure, but she was quite fat. My lord, she said, Governor Illyrio invites you to dinner, but it will be a long time before then. Are you a slave? Ian inexplicably remembered Taro Bayan's description of Yunke's bed slaves. I was sold here to please the king. The girl did not answer Ian directly, but reached out and began to untie Ian's belt. Please let me serve you. Ian held her little hand and shook his head at her. This environment was not suitable. Unexpectedly, the blonde girl obviously misunderstood Ian's meaning. She quickly said, if you prefer boys, we will arrange one for you immediately. Ian was stunned for a moment, and then realized that the other party thought he was gay. He smiled and shook his head again. This confused the girl. In her worldview, it was absolutely abnormal for a young man under 20 to refuse such a service. Looking at the girl's shocked expression, Ian also woke up. This is Illyrio's first level of school examination. If a man can resist even the beauty of women, how can he be easily controlled by Illyrio? I like to take the initiative. Ian quickly changed his attitude and put his hand on the girl's waist. You were sold here to please the king. What does the king think of you? It depends on your opinion. Here, you are my king. Then, Ian was pushed down by a pair of slender hands, and his whole body sank into the soft feather mattress. P's. Every step chosen by the protagonist is the most cost effective, surely feasible, plan I can think of under the current conditions. Many plans seem simple at first glance, but in the absence of relevant cheat codes, the risks and benefits are actually not proportional when put into practice. Chapter 106 Illyrio's School Examination. Only Illyrio, Ian and Darren attended the dinner. Viserys and his sister were not there, which made Ian a little disappointed, but this was also within his expectations. This was the first day they came to Illyrio. Illyrio would not be so careless to introduce them to the king. "Are you satisfied with the girl I sent you?" Illyrio asked Ian, while breaking a crab leg. They were all trained in Yunque. The people there created an art of love. Even the king is very satisfied with them. Which Carter can withstand this test? I came to seek glory, which makes my conscience condemned, Ian said politely with some embarrassment. Ha ha ha. Illyrio couldn't help but smile when he heard it. As long as you like it. There are many such servants in my mansion. They are good at different things. If you need them, you can use them at any time. What the hell? Those complicated moves in the afternoon are just good at one aspect? I finally know why Yunque can be called one of the 3 major city-states of Slavers Bay, just by relying on this business, along with Meereen, which produces craftsmen, slaves and gladiators, and Astapa, which produces Unsullied. Ian resisted the urge to hold his waist, and forced the topic back to business. Thank you for your generosity, Governor. But compared to this, I want to know when you can introduce us to His Majesty. Although I knew that Illyrio would not do so immediately, the request should be made as soon as possible. Before that, I hope to know why you want to come to King Viserys. Illyrio also restrained his smile after hearing this, and entered the state of talking about business. A few months ago, Darren heard from you that the princess was going to marry a powerful horse king, and that the horse king agreed to help His Majesty Viserys restore his country. So he immediately found my brother, hoping to make a fortune in the Riverlands, and then form a small army to come to Pentos to join His Majesty. So, it's because of loyalty? Illyrio narrowed his eyes. Because this is an opportunity. Ian shook his head. In the past 10 years or so, we have never tried to find the king and princess wandering in Essos. We dare not claim loyalty. You are sincere. We came here to bet on the future. You must know how the false king on the Iron Throne treated our Derry family after the War of the Usurper. We lost most of our territory and property, as well as the title of Earl. And our Grayson family was excluded and suppressed by the Arryn family, and the royal family's tax rate on the port of Gulltown doubled compared to the Targaryen dynasty. This not only makes it impossible for us to maintain the navy, but even it is difficult to maintain the city guard. Darren also hurriedly added. After my brother and Darren's plan was exposed, the Iron Throne took back our family's fiefdom and killed our relatives. Only under the Targaryen flag can our family have the opportunity to see the light of day again, and we can also get the highest honor. Everyone knows this. We need to see His Majesty, Ian said, looking at Illyrio. How many of you are left? Illyrio still did not answer Ian, and changed the subject. My forces have suffered a devastating disaster, Darren replied awkwardly, but Ian still has 4 knights. They did not participate in our looting. Illyrio did not continue to speak. He ate the food in his hands quietly until he finished it, and then he suddenly looked at Ian. I noticed that your invitation letter was from the cheese vendor Taro Bane, who is a snob. I wonder what price you paid for it? You had to ask him for help because of my negligence, so I should compensate you. He knew everything. The moment he looked at Illyrio, Ian suddenly had this feeling. It was Darren who was responsible for communicating with him during the day. In theory, he should regard Darren as the leader of his group, but from the beginning of the dinner tonight, Illyrio directly ignored Darren and talked to him the whole time. This means that Illyrio has discovered that he is a real core figure, and the only time he showed his leadership after coming to Pentos was when he communicated with Talo Bane. Ian's heart sank, and he quickly thought about how to answer. To be more precise, what kind of answer did Illyrio want to hear? Never betray Talo Bane. The next moment, Ian made a decision. No need. Ian shook his head. It was a very fair deal. We don't need any compensation. Darren looked at Ian in surprise, not understanding why Ian would waste such a great opportunity, but in the end he knew what was going on and didn't interrupt. After hearing this, Illyrio smiled. Ian knew that he had made the right bet. A person with a sense of honor and a spirit of contract was more worthy of Illyrio's favor than a two-faced guy anyway. The most important character in the Egan Sixth Restoration Plan that Illyrio and Varys cooperated with, Earl John Clinton, the adopted father of Egan Sixth, was such a person. During the Battle of the Bells during the War of the Usurper, John Connington once surrounded Robert Baratheon in Stonehall. At that time, he only needed to choose a fire to burn the entire Stonehall clean, to kill Robert Baratheon and end the war. Unfortunately, John Connington did not make such an indiscriminate massacre for honor considerations, but chose to search for Robert house by house, which dragged the battle until the arrival of Eddard Stark's reinforcement. In the end, the royal army under John Connington was defeated and lost the opportunity to save the Targaryen dynasty. And such John Connington was still entrusted with an important task by Illyrio, which means that the sense of honor occupies a large proportion in Illyrio's considerations. Taro Bane sold slaves behind my back and almost brought me trouble, but you chose to protect him. Illyrio quickly restrained his smile and replaced it with a serious attitude. This guy has indeed found out the truth. Ian showed a surprised expression, then lowered his head and decided to pretend to the end. I promised him not to tell the story. He helped us, and I can't betray him. A man with a sense of honor. Are you a knight? Yes, the person who knighted me was Sir Rhaerys Riverman, who is also my half-brother. Ian nodded. Anyway, there is no evidence. But before you came to Essos, you plundered your own territory. Is this your honor? Illyrio chuckled. Chapter 107 Review Plan. I didn't agree with their plan from the beginning, Ian said excitedly, but I was insignificant and could not convince the two brothers. Illyrio looked at Darren Grafson after hearing this. Yes, Sarian never participated in our looting. He only agreed to come to Pentos to join His Majesty. Darren nodded. After getting along with Ian for a period of time, his current code of conduct is to cooperate with Ian, no matter what he says. Well, you have proved yourself. Illyrio finally nodded again after a long time. Please stay here first, and the 4 knights under your command can also be brought in. When the time is right, I will naturally introduce you to His Majesty. What about Terabane? Ian showed a worried look. I will handle his affairs. Don't worry about it anymore. Illyrio wiped his mouth and stood up. You don't have to blame yourself for this, because I found out everything, and you have never betrayed anyone. I wish you a pleasant evening. Illyrio said and left the table. Ian was still thinking about what Illyrio meant by his last sentence, but when he turned around, he saw more than a dozen charming young K-maids standing behind them. He couldn't help but cover his waist and patted Darren Grafson on the shoulder. They are all yours. Have a nice night. With that, Ian ran out of the banquet hall. After returning to the room, Ian quickly returned to normal. The exercise in the afternoon was not enough to really make his current body feel tired, but pretending to be fake would give him a sufficient reason to reduce the number of times he took Illyrio's gifts, so as to save him more time to do his work. And the first thing he had to do at this moment was to review his plan. Of course, it was not to review the plan of swearing allegiance to Viserys. The reward for the second main line was as high as 5,000 gold dragons and 20 points. He had to get the bug of obtaining the title through the legal principle of Viserys and the identity of Derry's illegitimate son. And judging from the content of Illyrio's school exam, he had no doubts about his identity at all. What he wanted to know was his own values and abilities, and he finally passed Illyrio's test. Then, he only needed to wait to be introduced to Viserys to complete the second main line. The part that Ian really needed to re-examine in his plan was whether to choose to run away after completing the second main line, or to follow the original line of the Dragon Mother as he had thought before. He thought he had paid enough attention to Illyrio. After all, although Illyrio did not show much in the original book, his experience of working with the thief Varys as a wandering assassin to climb step by step to the most powerful governor of Pentos was enough for Ian to treat it with caution. But after what happened today, Ian found that he seemed to still underestimate Illyrio's intelligence network in the city of Pentos. Of course, not only himself, but even big merchants like Taro Bayan in Illyrio's Chamber of Commerce underestimated Illyrio's intelligence network. After all, if he could think that Illyrio could find out about the slave trade with just an invitation letter, he would not have given this task to himself. According to Ian's original plan, although he maintained a powerless posture in front of Illyrio, he secretly wanted to expand his network through Illyrio's Chamber of Commerce, and then make money through business as an agent. After all, after the completion of the main line 2, he will have more than 12,000 gold dragons in his hands, and he can't wait in Pentos for 2 months for the money to rot. But the terrible intelligence ability that Illyrio just showed made Ian couldn't help but have a retreat. In Pentos, no matter how secretive things are, there is a risk of being discovered by Illyrio, so things that make money secretly can't be done. But if I really let myself pretend to be a grandson for 2 months in Pentos, I would rather finish the main line 2 and take the money and run away. But what happens after running away? Buy a few ocean-going sailing ships to go to Yeti for business? This is definitely the fastest way to make money besides getting resources from the system. Back then, the sea snake Corlys Valerian, who was not black, why do I emphasize this, led 20 large ships to the east to transport pepper, elephants, and silk. 6 of the ships sank on the way, and only 14 returned to Westeros. Most of the elephants died on the journey, but the Valerian family still became the richest in the 7 kingdoms with the profits of this voyage. Even the Lannister family, who had mines at home, and the Hightower family, who controlled the largest port in the continent, Old Town, had to avoid it. But there are too many restrictions on this matter. The first is the cost. The large ships that can reach Yeti from Pentos through the Narrow Sea, the Summer Sea and the Jade Sea are compared with the contemporary carracks. The cost of a carrack is about 8,000 ducats, so 3 will cost about 24,000 ducats. If 1 ducat is 3.56 grams, and 1 gold dragon is 7.56 grams, then 24,000 ducats are worth about 11,000 gold dragons. In other words, if Ian wants to go to the ritual land, he can only buy 3 Pentos ocean-going galleons at most. If all 3 ships do not sink, a voyage can yield about 30,000 gold dragons, and then sell the ships, and the funds will almost quadruple. The second is the time cost. It takes at least a year to go back and forth to the ritual land. No one can tell how many variables will occur in a year when there are more than 30 players left. The third involves the issue of risk. The sea snake is one of the greatest navigators in the history of Westeros. He lost more than a quarter of his ships when he went to the ritual land. For someone who knows nothing about sailing, even if he consumes a scroll of basic skills to learn sailing skills, and then spends all 6 skill points to upgrade his sailing skills to a high level, he is still only at the level of an ordinary captain. If he wants to go to Yeti, he can only pin all his hopes on the captain he hires. But how can an excellent captain be found so easily? Shaking his head, Ian gave up this plan. But other business plans are not easy to think of. The highly profitable businesses are all monopolized. Ian has no business experience and no background or connections, so it is difficult to find a way. The next moment, he thought of farming. There are indeed many unowned lands on the continent of Essos, or places that have owners, but in fact no one cares. For example, Andalus, the former home of the Andals, and the upper reaches of the Roina River, the former home of the Roina. He only needs to go to the disputed land to raise a mercenary group to occupy a piece of land in those places. However, P.S. when reading this book, please ignore the setting in the original book that the Iron Throne is in debt of millions of gold dragons. Chapter 108 New Plan. However, although these places are ownerless, they all have claimants. If you just build a few small manors, it doesn't matter. Once there are signs of growth, they will inevitably be suppressed by Bravos or Volantis. For places without claimants, you need to go further east to find the territory of the Dothraki. If this is a standalone scenario, Ian can certainly fight wits and courage with these natives like the protagonists in countless other fanfictions and successfully develop the territory. But when facing so many players, once you openly farm in a certain place, it will be too easy to be targeted. The point is that from the perspective of time, it is a bit too late to start farming at this time. According to the rhythm of the original book, the long night will fall in more than 4 years at most. There is still hope that finding a ready-made city to carry out reforms and changes in such a short time will work. Find wasteland to farm. Without those golden fingers dedicated to farming, can you grow a flower? As for the long night not falling on Essos, Don't have such a fluke mentality. In the world of ice and fire, there are heroic legends of the Long Night and the Bringer of Light everywhere. Even the first Long Night in human history was caused by the Bloodstone Emperor of the Kingdom of Dawn of Yidi. There is no reason why the Long Night will not come to Essos. So the best way is to find a ready-made city, such as Astapor. This made Ian fall into a dilemma again, because the development speed of following the line of the Dragon Mother seems to be really faster than the method he can think of after running away, and he can obtain a large city-level territory and a complete unsullied army at a speed that other players cannot reach, in just over a year. This is without considering the dragon. Although seizing Astapor will greatly damage his own credibility and establish two enemies, young Kay and Meereen, as long as he can brainwash the Dragon Mother as a senior staff member and teacher in the previous time, change some of her ideas, so that she will not be so stubborn as to declare abolition of slavery. At least they would not offend New Ghis, Qarth, and Volantis at the same time, so that they would have enough time to conquer and digest the slave bay, instead of being trapped in the Meereen, not like in the original book. Even if the Dragon Queen is really extremely stubborn and cannot be changed and insists on abolishing slavery, then why can't you prepare in advance? If someone vigorously abolishes slavery in the slave bay, who will be the happiest? The answer is undoubtedly Braavos and the Iron Bank. First of all, Braavos is a city-state established by escaped slaves from Valyria. They hate slavery the most in the world, and they wish slavery would be extinct. This is the emotion of the citizens of Braavos. Then, Braavos' biggest competitor, Volantis, is a city-state that relies entirely on the slave economy. The movement to abolish slavery will shake the foundation of Volantis. Once someone abolishes slavery in Slavers Bay, it is very likely that Volantis will be involved in the war with Slavers Bay. At this time, Braavos can easily defeat Volantis agents in the civil war of the Three Daughters city-state and completely expel Volantis forces from the west coast of Essos. This is the interest of Braavos politicians. Finally, the abolition of slavery can liberate a large amount of productivity in Slavers Bay or even in Volantis after being defeated. The Iron Bank and the Chamber of Commerce of Braavos only need to come here to invest heavily and make a fortune, just like they did after forcing Pentos to abolish slavery. This is the interest of the Iron Bank. Therefore, if abolition of slavery is inevitable, then I can start to think of ways to establish a good relationship with the Braavos ambassador in Pentos and the representative of the Iron Bank. At that time, I can find acquaintances at the first time to convey my willingness to cooperate to Braavos. Thinking of this, Ian completely gave up the idea of running away. Not only can he not run away, but he also needs to do a lot of work to eliminate the interference of other players to ensure that everything develops according to the original plot. No, it doesn't need to develop completely according to the original, Ian suddenly thought. After Drogo's death, Dany and her friends could have saved several months of traveling across the Red Waste to Qarth. After all, Dany didn't get any substantial benefits from her trip to Qarth. She just listened to a few broken prophecies and was driven away. In the TV series, Dany plundered Qarth before leaving, which was too weak. In the original book, Qarth is located on the strait between the Summer Sea and the Jade Sea, and is a hub of trade between the East and the West. In reality, it is at least at the level of Constantinople. If the Dragon Queen really plundered Qarth, there would be no scene of being mocked by slave traders in Astapor. Let alone 8,000 unsullied, she should be able to afford even 80,000. Therefore, I only need to ensure that the original line develops until Dany hatches the dragon, and then they should go to Astapor immediately. But in that case, they need to pass through the entire Lazarlan region, which hates the Dothraki to the core. How can we do it? After a few minutes, Ian thought of a rough plan. After swearing allegiance to Viserys and getting the reward for the second main line, spend 20 points to buy 2 more A-level NPCs and let them take their wealth to the Slavers Bay in advance to buy some unsullied and a group of ordinary slave warriors from Meereen, and then go north to Lazarin, occupy a small city and wait. When Drogo's Carares enters Lazarin to plunder and is killed by the witch Mary Mazdur, Drogo's Carares will disintegrate on the spot and abandon Dany and others. At this time, the NPCs arranged in the Lazarin area can immediately bring troops to pick up themselves and Dragon Mother and others. With the escort of a whole army, the Lazarin cowards, known as sheep people, are unlikely to dare to attack them, so they can go directly to Astapa and capture the city in the original way. Anyway, Dragon Mother occupied Astapa with the help of the Unsullied, and the dragon is just the icing on the cake, so a dragon of 1 month and a dragon of 3 to 5 months will not have an impact on the battle situation. But in this way, your own development rhythm can save a few months. Finally, Ian finalized the plan. He stayed in Pentus, and during the next 2 months, he had 3 key tasks. First, to further gain Illyrio's trust to ensure that he could rest assured to let him stay with Viserys and his sister. Second, to find a way to get to know the ambassador of Bravos in Pentus and the representative of the Iron Bank in Pentus, and it would be best if he could establish friendship with them. Third, to take advantage of the free time to thoroughly digest his own page data and improve his strength. This is a bad decision, Talobane. You made a mistake. Prince Hassan opened his mouth and swallowed a peeled grape fed by the woman next to him and said to the cheese seller in front of him, "If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 109 Magic System. Why? Talobane was puzzled. Darren Grafson and his men are going to Illyrio. If they killed Silver the Spearbreaker, as long as we submit the evidence to Ambassador Oranto. Have they done it? Hassan chuckled. Not yet, but I believe they will do it. The surnamed Ian promised. I looked into his eyes and knew he was telling the truth. Sir Ian? Darren Grafson is like a squire in front of him. He is a very powerful young man. Talobane thought for a while and said, "You think highly of him? He is very smart. He saw through the little tricks I used as soon as he arrived. And he is very confident and confident. I can tell that for a man like him. I believe he will not choose to play tricks on me. But have you ever thought that the biggest trouble for your plan is Illyrio?" Prince Hassan smiled. As long as Ian doesn't tell Illyrio, how could Illyrio know about this? The invitation they used to attend Illyrio's banquet was yours, and you have a good reputation in Pentus. Don't you think Illyrio would be curious about why you gave them the invitation? Talobane was stunned for a moment, then defended. Even if he is curious, what can he find out? I made up that story, and the so-called slave ship does not exist at all. That's right, but you asked Sir Ian to kill the Spearbreaker. What is the Spearbreaker doing now? Helping Governor Haukat track down the slave traders in Pentus. Of course I know that Governor Illyrio will find me after Ian and the others take action, and I have prepared to leave before Ian and the others take action. Since I don't have any ship at all, Illyrio will only suspect that there are other traitors in the Chamber of Commerce, and then spend a lot of energy looking for a non-existent ship. After they take action? No. Now, Illyrio already knows what you have done. Once you return to Pentus, he will take you down at the first opportunity. How is that possible? Sarian and his men came to Pentus to seek refuge with the Beggar King. When Illyrio sees them, he will quickly find out their every move after they landed in Pentus. And you said that Sarian did not deceive you, and he really intended to help you deal with the Spearbreaker. So what will they do after leaving the Chamber of Commerce? Find out the details of the Spearbreaker. Talobane guessed. And when Illyrio found out that Sarian sent people to find out the information about the Spearbreaker, as soon as he came out of you, what would he think of? Slave trading. And after that, he only needs to lie to your young man lightly, such as telling him. Hassan paused, then imitated Illyrio's tone of voice. Talobane sold slaves behind my back and almost brought me trouble, but you chose to cover up for him? In this case, can your young man still keep a secret for you? Talobane's face turned pale. I have to escape. I have to escape immediately. He said hurriedly. Don't worry, I have already made arrangements for this. You can follow my caravan now. There will be a ship waiting for you in the north to take you to Bravos. Yes, your highness. Talobane stood up, bowed slightly, and then walked away quickly. He messed up our plan, and this incident will alert Illyrio. After Talobane walked away, Delph beside Hassan whispered, I think it's just the opposite. Hassan shook his head. Whose motive is more sufficient to frame Illyrio's merchant guild for trafficking slaves? The Volantis party. If Illyrio is accused of slave trading, he will be alienated by the Bravos ambassador, and the Volantis will have a chance to win him over. Delph paused. You mean, since the slave ship incident was originally made up by Talobane, Illyrio would not be able to find any evidence even if he investigated. In the end, he could only infer that the Volantis party did it through the final beneficiary. No matter what his final judgment is, as long as he thinks that any of us is trying to win him over in this way, our original goal will be achieved. I said a long time ago that the best way to deal with Illyrio is to put all actions in the open, but let him misjudge our purpose. Maybe you are right. Go back and check Surian mentioned by Talobane. Are you interested in him? Talobane rarely gives such a high evaluation to anyone, especially someone he has only met once, but hasn't threw away the wine glass in his hand and licked his lips. At this moment, I'm not interested in anyone other than you. The next morning, Ian almost didn't recognize Darren Grafson when he saw him in the restaurant. Darren in front of him was pale, his eyes were black, and his steps were weak. This made Ian wonder if this guy really enjoyed an overly pleasant night. Illyrio did not come here to share breakfast with them. Ian asked the butler and learned that Illyrio's residence was on the other side of the mansion. After breakfast, Ian, who did not see Illyrio, returned to his room and prepared to formally study this new item called the basic skill self-selected scroll that he had obtained for a long time. He closed his eyes and logged into the system and clicked to use this item. Then a long optional page appeared in front of Ian. Arrow, throwing, sprinting, horseback archery, wine tasting, poetry, playing, magic, fishing, ironwork, logging, medicine, surgery. Among the many skills, magic quickly attracted Ian's attention. Explain this magic option, Ian asked in his mind. The magic option, provided by the scroll, is just a general term. When choosing, the player needs to first select the magic system, and then select the specific magic. Anna's electronic voice sounded. Hearing this, Ian clicked on Magic in the options. Old God System, limited by First Men Bloodline, currently available. 7 God System, limited by Endel Bloodline, currently available. Drowned God System, limited by Ironborn Bloodline, currently not available. Lord of Light System, no bloodline limit, currently available. Water Magic, limited by Roina Bloodline, currently not available. Thousand-Faced God System, no bloodline limit, must join the House of Black and White, currently not available. Valyrian Witchcraft System, limited by Valyrian Dragon King Bloodline, currently not available. Asshai Black Magic System, no bloodline limit, must enter Asshai City, currently not available. Note: on the basis of meeting the prerequisites, players can learn multiple types of magic through the basic skill self-selected scroll. Chapter 110 Death is the only miracle. Ian was a little confused after seeing the last note. That shouldn't be the case. Aren't there real gods in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire? Why can we learn magic from different pantheons? And didn't answer this question. Perhaps in her AI logic, this question has nothing to do with the setting. After thinking about it, Ian changed his way of asking. Players can learn magic from different pantheons through system props. Is it because the power of the system offsets the conflicts between these systems? No. Anne answered this time. No. Ian frowned. So, is there a real god in this world? The influence of God will be reflected in all aspects of this world, but it will never directly participate in people's struggles. As for whether God exists, it is an unknown. You are a system AI. How can you not know? Wait. Ian suddenly remembered that Anne's explanation was very similar to the original words of the original author, Mr. Martin. When the host asked Martin in an interview whether there were gods in the world of ice and fire, he said he didn't know. So, Ian fell into deep thought. Although Anne did not give a definite answer, but quoted the original author's words to prevaricate this question. From the 2 points of players can learn magic from different pantheons at the same time and the power of the system does not offset the conflict between different systems, it is highly likely that the true god does not exist. Those guys called gods are just the controllers or the strongest of these powers, not the creators. Then, Ian thought of a Bravos proverb, death is the only miracle, and the rest are magic. He once thought that this was because the Bravos people mainly believed in the thousand-faced god who represented death, so they made up words to belittle other gods. But from another perspective, does this mean that the Bravos people who said this back then discovered something? Bravos was a city built by slaves who escaped from Valyria back then. The escaped slaves came from many different places and had various different beliefs. They include Intels, Summer Islanders, Giscari, Narth, Iban, Sana, and Valyrians who are in debt and committing crimes. Almost all the faiths in the world gather in Bravos, and Bravos has built temples for almost all gods. So who in the world is more qualified to evaluate these gods than the Bravos people at that time? If the Bravos people attribute all miracles, except death, to magic, does it mean that all the gods of the world of ice and fire are just humans with powerful magic, or can be called false gods? Thinking of this, Ian suddenly figured out a lot of things, such as the destruction of the Kingdom of Dawn and the Valyrian Freehold. These two countries have very similar situations. They were invincible in their heyday, and once all nations came to pay tribute, and then they were inexplicably destroyed by natural disasters. It's as if the gods are afraid of the greatness of mankind and destroy it. If the gods are true gods, why are they afraid of the great civilization created by humans? But if they are false gods, these things are explained. Thinking of this, Ian breathed a sigh of relief. Although even if those guys are false gods, they have enough power to destroy the Kingdom of Dawn or the Free Fortress of Valyria, and they are basically no different from true gods to Ian now. But Ian can't go to touch them now. As long as they are not true gods, Ian doesn't have to worry about being bound by the gods of this system when learning magic. This is definitely a huge good news. Without further entanglement, Ian began to study the magic provided by the scroll. First is the old god system. 2 selection boxes popped up on the interface. Skin Changer, gain the ability to invade the consciousness of animals or other people and control their behavior. Green Seer, gain the ability of green dreams, prophetic dreams, enter the fish beamwood and gain its vision, and explore the past. It requires the master level of shaper shifting skills, and is not currently available. Only one Skin Changer can be born in 1,000 people, and only one Green Seer can be born in 1,000 Skin Changers. It makes sense that becoming a Green Seer through the scroll requires the Skin Changer's ability to be maximumed out as a prerequisite. In Illyrio's mansion, this prison, if I could change into something like a mouse, a cat or a bird, I would definitely be able to find out a lot of useful information. Ian had already decided to use one of the scrolls on the Shaper Changer, but he still clicked to return to the previous level. Since you can read all the options after using the scroll, it would be a waste not to read them. The second one is the magic of the 7 gods system. Excuse me? Did I hear it right? The 7 gods system also has magic? Even when Ian was most convinced that the gods of the world of ice and fire were true gods, he knew that the 7 gods of the Andals were completely false gods, or even not false gods. They were simply tools made up by humans to maintain their rule. After all, this religion, which is clearly in a fantasy world, has never produced any miracles, even if they are fake. They said that their iron smelting process was taught to them by the blacksmith among the 7 gods in a dream. This is quite a joke. After all, thousands of years after the Yeti people in the East used technologies such as pouring steel and frying steel, the Andals were still smelting iron. If the blacksmith is a god, there is no reason why his craftsmanship is worse than that of humans. Sure enough, when Ian clicked on the 7 gods system, the selection box that popped up was as follows: 7 gods classics and the art of incitement. By upgrading this skill, you can gradually obtain the classic works, doctrine explanations, missionary notes and diary memories of all the 7 god sects. The art of cultivating a charlatan? You call this thing magic? But this thing sounds inexplicably practical. Ian was a little amused. The next system of the drowned god could not be opened, but Ian himself was not very interested. The drowned god of the Ironborn is believed to be a marine creature called the Deep One. This creature did have a very glorious period, but now it is not worth mentioning. Then there is the Lord of Light, the most powerful god in the world of ice and fire. His red priest Melisandre once killed Renly with shadow magic, and cursed 3 false kings to death with blood of the king. Jon Snow was also resurrected in the TV series. His red monk Thoros of Me resurrected the leader of the Brotherhood without banners, the lightning lord Beric Dondarrion. several times through prayer, and finally resurrected the Stonahat Lady Catelyn Tully who died in the bloody wedding. Chapter 111, The Shaper Changer. There are 2 selection boxes under the Lord of Light system. Red God Priest, gain the ability to mobilize flames and the ability to see prophecies in flames. After reaching the master level, you can exchange for a certain hopeful result by sacrificing, burning, sacrifices of sufficient value. Shadowbinder, gain the ability of shadow magic, which requires the Red God Priest to be proficient, or enter the city of Asshai, and have a mental power of more than 20. It is not currently selectable. Sure enough, there is no resurrection spell. Ian pursed his lips, which was consistent with his initial guess, when he created the character. Wait, speaking of resurrection, Ian once again remembered the Bravos proverb death is the only miracle, and the rest are magic. What about the resurrection of the Lord of Light? This is a reversal of death. Is reversing a miracle something that magic can do? Could it be that the Lord of Light is a true god? No. Then, Ian noticed the description in Shadowbinder or enter the city of Asshai, and have a mental power of more than 20. Entering the city of Asshai is a restriction condition of the Asshai magic system. It is somewhat unreasonable for this condition to appear in the Red God system. And if a person can ignore the prerequisite of Red God Priest Mastery to learn shadow magic just by entering the city of Asshai, it would be very interesting. Because R'hllor's full title is Lord of Light, Heart of Holy Flame, God of Shadow and Fire, and Melisandre even claims that Shadow is the servant of light, the descendant of flame. What does it mean that shadow magic, as a descendant of flame, can bypass the Red God system of magic and be learned? God of Shadow and Fire R'hllor cannot fully master shadow magic. A guy who can't even fully master the authority given by his own name. Ian really finds it hard to believe that he is a true god. As for the resurrection ability, who knows? Ian couldn't make further judgments. Before getting more information, he could only temporarily put away these ideas and continue to look back. Roy couldn't choose the bloodline limited water magic, which made Ian a little regretful, because this thing is a good combat power supplement for the late stage. When the Rhoynar fought the Valyrians, they killed the 3-headed dragon with water magic, which angered the Valyrians, and caused 300 dragons from the Valyrian freehold to come out and destroy the Rhoynar kingdom. However, after the Rhoynar were defeated, their leader, Prince Gerrin, still used forbidden water magic to awaken the Mother Rhoyne River, flooding the Valyrian invasion army that entered Cheyenne with a raging flood, causing countless dragon kings to be defeated here. Cheyenne has been shrouded in grey fog since then, and it has become a gathering place for grayscale patients, known as the Heartbroken Territory. The next option is Thousand-Faced God System. This is definitely the magic of the Faceless Man to change his appearance. When they become a person, their height, body shape and voice will change together. This made Ian have an idea. If the player learns this skill and keeps playing until the Faceless Man's ability reaches the master level, wouldn't he be able to murder an already strong player and replace him, and directly obtain his power and status? Ian was tempted for a moment, and even thought of going to Bravos to join the House of Black and White. But he soon gave up the idea, because joining the Faceless Men basically meant losing the opportunity to continue to brush points and gain points through various tasks and achievements. Without the blessing of the attribute board, it is simply a dream to want to become a powerful Faceless Men through training. Even Araya, a genius who was spotted by Jaqen at first sight, is still just above the level of a beginner after more than a year in the House of Black and White. Original plot. Unless you brush up the required attributes and skill points outside first, and then join the House of Black and White, then you may be able to practice the skills of the Faceless Men to the peak faster with the blessing of the system board. But if you really wait until you have brushed up enough, becoming a Faceless Men may not be the best choice. After all, the strongest point of the Faceless Men is disguise. If you really meet a player who has maximum doubt green vision or flame prophecy, disguise may not work well. The last 2 items cannot be opened. Ian was not very clear about the Valyrian witchcraft system, because the Dragon Kings of Valyria preferred a simpler and more effective way of attack, Dragon Flame, to solve the enemy, and there were few records about their witchcraft. As for the black magic system of Asshai, Ian estimated that all the remaining mystical systems in this world were included in it: wizards, alchemists, moonsingers, dark warlocks, necromancers, cloud wizards, blood wizards, torturers, trial knights, poisoners, shepherd priestesses, night walkers, and even the magic systems of Black Goat, Pale Saint Child and Night Lion. Back to the top, Ian decided to stick to the original idea, skin changers. Although at first glance, the ability of the Red God Priest is no worse than that of the skin changer, but in terms of its mastery requirements, it is somewhat different. The magic of the skin changer can be done by just catching a wildling from the outer wall who has successfully communicated with the spirit. But what about the fire priest? Take Melisandre, one of the most powerful servants of the Lord of Light, for example. She could misinterpret the prophecy she saw in the flames, so how could she interpret it? It took her more than 10 seconds to add a buff to the Dothrakar's Carrick Scimitar TV plot. It was hard for Ian to believe that he could skillfully use fire magic to kill the enemy, and fire magic had almost no power before the dragon reappeared. Thinking of this, Ian clicked on the skin changer. Player obtained skills. Basic skin changer. The updated data card is Ian, Strength 32, Agility 27, Spiritual Power 7 skills, Etiquette Basics, Common Language Reading and Writing Basics, Advanced Swordsmanship, Advanced Horsemanship, Intermediate Lance, Skin Changer Basics Attribute Points. 0 Skill Points. 6 points. 31 items. Basic skill scroll of your choice. Then Ian was ready to directly upgrade the skin changer to advanced level, but after he clicked the upgrade button, the system popped up the following prompt box: unable to upgrade. The level of magic skills, calculated as level 1, does not exceed 1/5 of the spiritual power. So if I want to learn magic, I have to get a lot of free attribute points first. Ian showed a painful mask expression. Although I got a lot of random attributes by killing players after the start, free attribute points are not easy to get. So far, Ian has only obtained free attribute points through the mainline 1, Bounty 1 and the optional task, Death of Black Falcon. The current main quest 2 and the completed Bounty 2, King's Landing, do not have attribute points, so the only way Ian can think of to obtain attributes is to complete optional tasks. However, the optional tasks provided by this system are too unreliable. Once the client lies, it is very likely that nothing will be accomplished. Chapter 112 Illyrio's Mission. I told you that I will arrange a meeting between you and the king at the right time. I want to know, when is the right time? Illyrio stopped cutting the leg of lamb with a dinner knife and looked up at Ian. Are you dissatisfied with living here, Sir Ian? Of course not. Compared with here, Your Excellency the Governor, Derry is like a pigsty in the countryside. Then why are you so impatient? You have only been here for 3 days. It's not that I'm impatient, Your Excellency the Governor. I waited until today to come to you. It is precisely a manifestation of my patience. Because according to common sense, you should have let us see His Majesty on the day you verified our identities, or at most the next day. Or do you still have doubts about us? Absolutely not. Illyrio shook his head with a smile. I actually plan to introduce you to His Majesty in a more formal occasion. At that time, we will announce to the world that some nobles in Westeros have begun to surrender to His Majesty, thereby setting a good example for other lords of Westeros. Then, when is this formal occasion? When Khal Drogo, the Horse King who is going to marry the princess, arrives in Pentos. He will hold a banquet in his palace in Pentos that we jointly gave him. Many of the great nobles of Essos will attend. I think it would be most appropriate to arrange for you to swear allegiance to the king at that time, and then the king will give you and Aaron your original titles. Khal Drogo's banquet. That's all in the first episode of the TV series, which is nearly 2 months away. As far as I know, Drogo and his Cararess are still very far from Pentos. Ian resisted the urge to slap Illyrio's fat face and said in a negotiating tone, perhaps we can meet the king first and then have a formal ceremony at the banquet you mentioned. I'm not negotiating with you, Sir Ian. Illyrio still had that kind smile on his face, but his tone was unquestionable. Or do you have a reason to meet the king as soon as possible? That's right, Ian said, but Ian Rivers shouldn't have that. Well, I admit, Sir Illyrio, I'm anxious to get the family name. I'm too eager to get rid of the identity of a bastard, and only the king has the power to give a bastard a surname. That's all. You don't understand what it feels like to be a bastard. The purpose of my coming here is. Ian blurted out excitedly, but he stopped quickly halfway through and looked away, as if he didn't dare to look at Illyrio again. Okay, as you wish. Ian gave up arguing and started eating again. The best way to fight against a smart man like Illyrio is to satisfy his superiority in intelligence and status. Let him see through your purpose and force you to surrender. When he thinks he can easily control you, he will reduce his vigilance and give you more trust. As for why he needs more trust from Illyrio, Ian's new plan is to try to become Illyrio's own man. Helping Illyrio can not only quickly brush out more optional tasks, but also have the opportunity to use Illyrio's intelligence network to deal with other players hiding in the city of Pentus. Ian can see from Illyrio's eyes that he is very satisfied with his easy tricking of his purpose. In this way, Ian's two purposes of coming to Illyrio this time have been achieved. However, Ian still doesn't understand the question of meeting the king. Why is Illyrio unwilling to let him see Viserys as soon as possible? What is special about the time he set, the Feast of the Horse King? Soon, Ian found the answer. In the original novel, Jorah Mormont, the first licker under the Dragon Mother, was introduced to Viserys and his sister at that banquet when he had just arrived in Pentus. Illyrio probably didn't want to get in touch with Viserys and his sister too early, so as not to gain the trust of Viserys and his sister before Jorah Mormont, which would marginalize this chess piece of Varys. That's right, Jorah Mormont was the person Varys arranged to monitor them beside the Dragon Mother, not the so-called assassin. This can be seen from two aspects. First, Jorah Mormont did not seem to have made any attempt to assassinate the wandering brothers and sisters after being introduced to Viserys, which did not fit his identity as an assassin. Second, after Jorah Mormont fell in love with Daenerys, he still sent Varys one last intelligence encarth. If Jorah hadn't known that Varys would never hurt Daenerys, he would not have continued to send intelligence to Varys. Of course, perhaps Illyrio didn't know who Varys would send at this time, but he had already reserved a position for the chess piece. Sir Illyrio, Ian spoke again, after making his judgment. I have followed your arrangement, which will result in us having nothing to do for the next 2 months. I can't sit still. If we want to make some preparations in advance for His Majesty's great cause, do you have any suggestions? Or, is there anything we can help with? Help me? Illyrio became interested. You are His Majesty's sponsor and our most important ally. Of course, I hope to establish a deeper friendship with you. This is not like the words of a noble knight in Westeros. For a merchant of lowly descent like me, you should have contempt in your heart, while pretending to smile on the surface. No one is lower than a bastard. Ian showed the vicissitudes of life. As long as I can get the surname and honor, I can cooperate with anyone. That's right, I'm talking about your little Egan. Quickly pull me into your plan. Well, Illyrio nodded. Since you want to help me, I do have a problem. Remember Terabane? Illyrio said immediately. The cheese seller who gave us the invitation. I remember you told me not to bother with this matter anymore. Ian was a little surprised. Something has changed. Terabane disappeared. Disappeared? Terabane left Pentus from the North Gate the day after meeting you. This was a normal move. The north of there is the source of milk for his cheese production workshop, and he would go there from time to time. However, this time he did not come back, and he did not even take his property in Pentus with him. My people secretly went to explore his house, and found that his servants were packing up his property in the house. Chapter 113, The Art of Counter Control. Haven't you finished cleaning up yet? Ian suddenly asked. Yes, Illyrio replied, and then said, tell me what you said when you talked to Talobane. Tell me everything you remember. Haven't you already found out everything? It's about the slave ship. Without alerting Talobane, I can only find out that you were talking to him at the time. Sir Ian. After all, my little mice are not real mice, and it is impossible for them to enter the range where they can hear your conversation. I only guessed that your conversation was related to the slave trade because you sent someone to inquire about the Spearbreaker afterwards. What the hell? So you were deceiving me at the time. Ian pulled the corner of his mouth. This is just a normal method. Because the slave trade in my guild really touched my bottom line. This may not only involve me in the party struggle in Pentus, but also Anger Ambassador or Anto in Bravus. What do you think? Do you decide to tell me everything, or stick to your honor? Illyrio chuckled, very satisfied with Ian's surprised look. I want to uphold my honor, but Terabane seems to have lied to me. Ian shook his head and began to recount the details of his conversation with Terabane. That's what happened. There are obviously many problems here, aren't there? According to what you said, Terabane's slave trade has touched your bottom line, so he should have been ready to escape long ago. My appearance was an accident. When he asked me for help, he said that he had no other way to solve the problem of Spearbreaker. But he is a servant and is still packing up his belongings. This means that the idea of escaping only came to him after he met me. This is too strange. Of course he doesn't need to prepare to escape in advance. I checked. Terabane's last ship sank in a shipwreck a year ago. He doesn't have any ship, so the slave ship he mentioned doesn't belong to him. Illyrio explained Ian's doubts. Then the problem is even bigger. If the slave ship issue can't be traced to him, why did he expose such a thing himself? Ian spread his hands. Unless he wanted to leave evidence of my killing of Spearbreaker, and then use it to prove that Illyrio was involved in the slave trade. Can you think of anything? Illyrio asked with interest. To be honest, Ian's ability to think of these questions made him feel enlightened. He hadn't seen such a smart young man for a long time, which made him feel that he cherished talent. This Ian pondered for a long time, still shook his head. I can't think of it. You promised to help Taro Bayan kill the Spearbreaker who threatened him after attending the banquet, but he decided to escape. From the point of view of his servants packing up their belongings, he actually planned to come back from Pentus this time. So when did he plan to escape? Illyrio consciously guided. After I killed Spearbreaker? The reason why he planned to come back was to avoid me giving up the plan to kill Spearbreaker, because I couldn't find him after the banquet. Ian appropriately accepted Illyrio's guidance. But why did he need to escape after I killed Spearbreaker? I had already helped him solve the problem at that time. So, the fact that I killed the Spearbreaker was his problem? Exclamation mark. Ian suddenly shouted excitedly, as if he had realized something. He wanted others to think that I was sent by you to kill the Spearbreaker? Illyrio nodded with satisfaction. But he hasn't come back yet. Isn't he afraid that I will give up the action because I can't find him, thus making his plan fail? Ian continued to ask. Think further. Illyrio raised his hand. What are the things that may lead to this situation? He was scared, so he gave up the action and chose to run away directly. Ian said casually. To show Illyrio his talent, it was enough to just go to that step, leaving enough space for Illyrio to be a teacher. Okay. Illyrio laughed awkwardly and realized that this question was a bit too difficult for a young man from Westeros who had just arrived in Pentus. Well, you don't know the current situation in Pentus, so it's normal that you can't think of the truth. Obviously, Illyrio gave the answer. Either someone reminded him or someone silenced him, and he left Pentus this time to meet the mastermind, because they couldn't find a way to meet in Pentus without being discovered by me. Someone instructed Taro Bayan. Was it the Volantis party? After all, framing you for slave trading can directly provoke a fight between you and the Halkett family, and it can also damage your image in the eyes of the Bravos ambassador. Ian made the most superficial guess to continue to show his political innocence. Volantis party? It's possible. After all, they are the most direct beneficiaries. Illyrio nodded. But is it possible that the Bravos party will use this to alienate the relationship between me and the Volantis party? Moreover, destroying my image in the eyes of Ambassador Oranto is also beneficial to Prince Hazan and other Bravos party members. This will make them the only choice for the Iron Bank. Ian opened his mouth wide, as if to say, is it possible? Ha ha ha. Illyrio laughed. You and Aaron, as the first Westeros nobles to come to the king, you must form the core of the royal council, but you still have a lot to learn to do these things well. Your Excellency the governor is willing to teach me, Ian said, immediately overjoyed. Ha ha ha. You are very smart, although you still seem a little immature, blind and reckless now, but these are common characteristics of young people. As long as you are given time, sooner or later you will become a great help in the restoration of the Targaryen dynasty. By then, whether it is the surname, honor, territory, or wealth you want, it will be at your fingertips. Illyrio used the term Targaryen restoration instead of His Majesty Viserys restoration, which was to pave the way for bringing Aegon VI to the surface later. Ian knew that he was now officially included in Illyrio's plan. As a senior, he spoke in a tone of teaching and guidance to strengthen his dominant position in the relationship between the two sides. While pointing out the other party's shortcomings, he painted a big pie and hinted that the other party could eat this big pie as long as he got his help in order to arouse the other party's expectations of serving him. Illyrio's words in the second half of the conversation today were all standard manipulating techniques. If it were a real young man without a player's perspective, he would definitely be tamed and obedient by Illyrio. But Ian, who had seen through Illyrio's words, only needed to follow Illyrio's words to cooperate with him, and he could perfectly leave Illyrio with the impression that he had been dominated by him, thereby further gaining his trust. This is the art of counter-manipulation. Chapter 114 Optional Mission 3. Let's get back to the original topic. Illyrio certainly would not discuss the issue of Aegon with Ian right now. You want to find something to do during this time, right? Yes. Is there anything I can help you with? Ian nodded. It's still Terrabane's problem. He mentioned a slave ship, but he himself doesn't have a ship. This means that there are other traitors in my Chamber of Commerce. Do you want me to help you find out the traitor? Yes, but finding out the traitor is a job that can easily offend people. Several of my confidants are not suitable for this. But you are different. After all, you have no business in Pentus, and you won't stay here for long. You don't need to look at the face of any merchant. Of course, this is just my suggestion, and the choice is yours. You are too polite, Lord Illyrio. Your trouble is my trouble. Ian patted his chest and assured. But, I'm not very familiar with either Pentus or your Chamber of Commerce, and I don't know where to start. Haha, my butler will tell you some information later. You can ask him any questions you have. Illyrio was obviously very satisfied with Ian's answer. In addition, considering your lack of manpower, I will introduce two people to you later. One of them is a mercenary captain who has served me for a long time, and the other is the leader of my little mice. As for this mission itself, maybe you can take it as the first lesson of your political career. What the hell? Ian was really shocked. Illyrio not only regarded him as a confidant, but also trained him as a son. But think about it, any big boss would want to take in a young man like Ian Rivers, who has a clean background, no relatives, extraordinary talent and is so smart, as his godson. This time, I have made a lot of money. I can borrow Illyrio's troops and intelligence resources, and the city of Pentus will become my home. As long as I can find a way to smuggle some private goods in the process of investigating the traitor, will the remaining players hiding in Pentus still have a way to survive? I will never let you down. Ian answered immediately. Oh, wait, why didn't the optional mission appear? Yes, it's because there is no reward. The condition for the optional mission to appear is that the natives formally ask the players for help and clearly state the reward. Your Excellency Governor, I have another unwelcome request. We came to Pentus almost on the run, so I'm a little short of funds now. Ian thought for a while and said, that's right, without money, many things are really hard to do. Illyrio agreed with this reason. Like this, you can directly withdraw 200 gold dragons from the butler later. If there are special circumstances during the investigation, you can apply for more funds from the butler, as long as the reason can convince the butler. There is no upper limit on the amount. Then, the activity funds are not rewards. Ian roared in his heart, but a flattering smile appeared on his face. After I find out the traitor, can the remaining activity funds belong to me? Ha 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 ha. Illyrio laughed immediately, as expected of a young man. Of course, including the extra part you applied for. It will all belong to you, after you find the traitor. Ding. The next moment, the optional tasks popped up. Discovery triggers the task, the mole in Illyrio's Chamber of Commerce. Task description. Illyrio suspects that there is a mole in his Chamber of Commerce who is involved in the slave trade, and hopes that you can help him catch him. Task reward. The remaining part of your activity funds for participating in this task. Additional reward. Unknown. Accept. Consumes 1 point. Reject. Ian subconsciously wanted to click to accept, but at this moment, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. What if there is no mole? from beginning to end. Only Terabane mentioned them all and the slave ship, and Terabane's purpose was to induce him to kill the Spearbreaker to frame Illyrio for participating in the slave trade. Whether the slave ship exists or not, it seems to have no effect on Terabane's plan. Thinking of this, Ian moved the pointer of his mental power away from accept. He had been fooled once. If the optional task he accepted was not find the Blackfire treasure, but find out the truth about the Blackfire treasure, or destroy the ghost of White Wall City, he would not have lost the reward of a task in vain. Sir Illyrio, I suddenly thought of a possibility. Is it possible that this traitor does not exist at all? Ian directly put forward his guess. The traitor does not exist? It seems there is this possibility, but we can't hope that the traitor does not exist, right? Of course, what I mean is, if the traitor does not exist, how can I get my reward? Like this, if the conclusion of your investigation is that the traitor does not exist, as long as no slave ships appear in my guild before the end of this month when the Bravas party ends the complete slave trade, you will be considered to have completed the task. The task interface in the system immediately changed. Discovery trigger task, the traitor in Illyrio's guild task description. Illyrio suspects that there is a traitor in his guild who is involved in the slave trade, and hopes that you can help him catch him, or ensure that no slave ships in his guild appear in the port of Pentus before the end of the month. Mission reward, the remaining part of your activity funds for this mission. Additional reward, unknown, accept. Consumes 1 point. Reject. This time, Ian directly clicked accept. Then I have no problem. Ian smiled. Go to the front hall and wait. My butler will come to you soon. Illyrio nodded, and then ended the breakfast that should have ended long ago. After arriving at the front hall, Ian sat on the chair and logged into the system again. He originally wanted to browse the tasks after being accepted again, but he didn't expect to see such an email as soon as he arrived. Complete optional mission 3, the Insider of Illyrio's Chamber of Commerce mission difficulty rating, medium mission reward. After Illyrio accepts the results, you will receive all the remaining activity funds. Additional rewards. 3 points, 3 attribute points. The updated profile card is Ian, Strength 32, Agility 27, Mental Strength 7 skills, Etiquette Basics, Common Language Reading and Writing Basics, Advanced Swordsmanship, Advanced Horsemanship, Intermediate Lance, Skin Changer Basics attribute points. 3 skill points. 6 points. 33 items, basic skill self-selected scroll. Fortunately, I was careful. Ian patted his chest quickly. I didn't expect that the slave ship really didn't exist. That's why the system judged that the mission was completed the moment he received the mission. Ian didn't dare to think about how many detours he would have to take if he didn't have a flash of inspiration to let Illyrio change the standard for mission completion. Chapter 115, The Situation in Pentus. After calming down his excitement, Ian soon noticed a problem. The difficulty of this task was judged as medium, but he did almost nothing. As for the task of revenge for the Black Falcon, which was also judged as medium, he made great efforts to complete it. To be honest, Ian has never been able to figure out the criteria for judging the difficulty of optional tasks. He once tried to ask Annie, but was told that it was a secret. According to Ian's original idea, the difficulty of optional tasks should be related to the current strength. After all, if a person has developed and then does some tasks that are judged as simple or medium in the early stage of the game, it is effortless. If the judgment of the difficulty of the task has not changed, the player can completely direct and act by himself and brush low-level tasks infinitely. With Ian's understanding of Gauss planning, he believes that such a big bug is impossible to exist. But the task in front of him is difficult for Ian to understand, because this is a task that does not need to be done. No, looking at the description of this task again, Ian found the problem. This task itself still requires Ian to find the insider of Illyrio's Chamber of Commerce, which means that this medium difficulty judgment is for catching the insider. Assuming that there is such an insider, it is normal to judge such a task as medium, based on Ian's current strength. As for Ian's direct completion of the task, it was because he asked Illyrio to add a judgment for completing the task. In the end, no slave ship appeared. After discovering this, Ian's heart became hot. This wave is going to be released. Although the concealment of this bug is much higher than that of the one whose difficulty judgment does not change with strength, it can only be discovered under very coincidental circumstances, but its outrageousness is not different at all. With the organizer's clear promise that no bugs will be fixed, I can completely plan the script according to the same routine and mass produce the corresponding tasks. But, with the level of that dog planner, did he really not prepare any backup in advance? Ian thought immediately. Never mind, I'll know when I find an opportunity to test it again. Sir Ian? A voice suddenly sounded, interrupting Ian's fantasy. Who are you? Looking at the well-dressed old man in front of him, Ian didn't react for a moment. My name is Mills, and I'm the steward of Lord Illyrio. According to Lord Illyrio's instructions, I'm here to solve your doubts. Oh yes, Ian almost forgot about the main business. Only then did he remember that, although he already knew that the traitor did not exist, he had no evidence to convince Illyrio. Of course, even if there was evidence, Ian would not be able to just deal with Illyrio. He still needed to get to know these capable men under Illyrio, and then use their strength. How good it is, now that he doesn't really have to worry about the traitor problem. His next action can change from smuggling private goods to all private goods. Butler Mills, I'm sorry to trouble you. This is my job. Mills smiled. He had a good impression of this young man. So, where do we start? Here is a list. Steward Mills handed a piece of paper to Ian. It records the detailed information of the merchants in the Governor's Chamber of Commerce whose ships are expected to return to Pentus before the end of the month and the beginning of next month. The 7 people on the first page need to be paid special attention to. The first 2 are, because they are close to Taro Bayan. The 3rd to the 6th are members of the Bravus party, and the 7th is from the Volantis party. Why keep the spies who have been found out? Ian asked immediately. Your Excellency is a businessman. His goal of not getting involved in party disputes is not to offend both sides, not to offend both sides at the same time. Therefore, when other governors want to participate in these profitable businesses, Lord Illyrio usually turns a blind eye. Ian nodded. So, are there any other questions? No, the information on it is enough. Ian held the list and smiled confidently. Are you kidding? How could he not be confident? It's good that you have an idea. Mills also smiled. In addition, for your investigation, the governor has specially arranged people for you. They are on their way to the governor's mansion. You can wait for them here. Okay. Sir Ian. Mills once again said Ian's formal title. Perhaps you should think about it again. Do you have any other questions? Other questions? This time Ian also found it unusual. If Mills was just asking routine questions just now, then this time it was obviously a reminder to himself. But what other questions do I need to ask? Ian looked at the list and fell into deep thought. If I didn't know the answer, that there was no traitor, in advance through the system, what other questions would I need to ask before conducting an investigation? Mr. Mills, Ian thought of the answer quickly. Can you tell me more about the Pentus faction? You are better than I thought, Sir Ian. Mills was a little surprised. You got the point without me even reminding you. He paused. Lord Illyrio asked me to tell you that when you look at something, you must observe its essence through the surface. The matter of the traitor in the Chamber of Commerce is essentially a part of the Pentus faction. If you plunge into this muddy water without understanding the whole thing, you may not only return empty-handed, but also put yourself in danger. I'll remember it. Ian nodded, with a little more sincerity in his mentality. He could see that Illyrio was really teaching him, and as a modern person who had read many works on power struggles, but all his experience was still at the theoretical level, he could undoubtedly learn something from an old fox like Illyrio. Pentus is currently divided into 3 factions, Mills said without further explanation. The first is the faction of the trade governors headed by Lord Illyrio. We uphold the concept of peaceful trade, hope to maintain friendly relations with both Bravus and Volantis, and oppose any adventurism. We originally had a total of 4 people on our side. Although it was only a loose alliance, we also controlled the overall voice of Pentus. However, Mills paused, but 2 years ago, the Tagris family on our side suffered misfortune. In 2 years, they lost 7 large ocean-going ships and declared bankruptcy due to insolvency and were squeezed out of the governor's council. P.S. I have been so busy these days that I have been using the mobile code in my spare time. It can be seen from the increasingly unstable update time. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116. Ironbank doubles the price. And the Morn family that replaced the Tagris family is not native to Pentus. They started out as pirates on the Summer Sea. Governor Sisito Morn, right? The cheese seller who gave me the invitation mentioned that most of the slave trade in Pentus was his business. Ian had an impression of the surname Morn. Yes, Sisito Morn first established relations with many families in Pentus by providing Pentus with a slave transport route that could avoid the search of the purple ship fleet of Bravus. With this, he obtained the citizenship of Pentus and quickly established a foothold in the upper class. Sisito Morn was very generous. He held banquets, horse racing, hunting and competitions almost every day in Pentus, which made people wonder whether the wealth he obtained from the secret slave trade was enough for him to squander. This doubt lasted until the position of governor of Pentus became vacant, and Sisito Morn suddenly announced his candidacy in a high-profile manner. It was only then that you realized that the sponsor behind him was Volantis? Ian guessed. Oh. Mills looked at Ian in surprise. Yes, at that time, Sisito Morn suddenly ran for election, and then used a huge amount of money to bribe more than half of the members of the Grand Council, and became one of the 7 governors of Pentus with an indisputable high number of votes. Afterwards, he revealed his purpose. He began to advocate breaking the shackles that the Bravus people put on our heads, and restoring the ancient and glorious slave trade. What a joke. Ian almost blurted out, does he think the purple ship fleet of Bravus doesn't exist? Challenging the overlord of the narrow sea, Bravus, how much does it take to say such a thing? It has been 91 years since the last war between us and Bravus, Sir Ian. It is a very long time. Steward Mills shook his head with a wry smile. Most of the people of Pentus have forgotten the fear that the purple fleet of Bravus brought to us. They only feel that the agreement signed with Bravus has brought shame to our city. As Sisito Morn said, the people of Bravus put shackles on our heads, and the people of Pentus want to break it. How similar is this to the Carthaginians after the Second Punic War? Ian suddenly thought. Obviously, after the Romans defeated Hannibal with great difficulty, they gave up revenge on Carthage and magnanimously retained Carthage's autonomy, but restricted them from developing the navy, and required them not to declare war without the consent of the Romans. However, the Carthaginians played with fire and burned themselves. They took the initiative to attack Numidia, an ally of Rome, and said one thing to the Roman Senate delegation and another behind their backs. This kind of repeated inconsistency eventually ignited the anger of the Romans and brought disaster to Carthage. But the situation in Pentus was different from that in Carthage. The Carthaginians were courting their own death, while behind Pentus was Volantis, the most powerful city-state in Essos. The situation in Pentus should be closer to Ermeo. So were the governors of Pentus also comedians before? I understand that civilians are easily incited, but in Pentus, I think civilians should not have the final say, right? Ian raised his doubts. Of course, in Pentus, only the Governor's Council and the Great Council have the power to make decisions. So from the beginning, Sisito has trapped the 2 governors on his ship. Mills explained. Through the slave trade? Slave trade and the gold of Volantis. Butler Mills answered Ian's question, and continued. Simone has tied up the 2 governors, Godding Haukat and Graelotetras, through interests, and then with the support of old Governor Percy Rotulus, who has long been dissatisfied with the current situation in Pentus. The war faction has more say in the Governor's Council than us for the first time. Really? Ian felt a little confused now. Isn't the Haukat family the so-called Bravus party? This time the operation to thoroughly investigate the slave trade was initiated by them. That's why I told you at the beginning that there are 3 factions in Pentus. Ian did not answer, waiting for Mills to continue. The Titrius family and the Halkett family have always been good allies. In this generation, the children of the two governors are even engaged. After the slave trader Governor Sisito Morn revealed his true intentions, the two families also turned to Sisito's side. With their efforts, the Governor's Council of Pentos once passed a proposal to rebuild the fleet and declare war on Bravos, and submitted it to the Great Council for a vote. But it didn't succeed. Ian asked curiously. If it succeeded, the war would have been fought long ago, instead of just a party dispute like now. On the day when the Great Council composed of 40 families voted, Governor Golding Halkett and the family behind him turned against the court and voted against the proposal to declare war on Bravos. Why? Because the Iron Bank offered double the price. PFFT. Ian almost couldn't help laughing. This is indeed something that the Bravos people can do. A Lannister family in Westeros, a Bravos Iron Bank in the Free Trade City-State. The ultimate killer move of these two major forces is add money. No matter how much you give, I will pay double. I'm so arrogant. Then why doesn't the Teteros family just accept the money from Bravos? When the benefits are higher, there is no reason for them to continue to support Volantis. Because Bravos didn't give them, Mills said, and he couldn't help laughing. Instead of giving money to the Teteros family, Bravos suppressed several of the Teteros family's businesses. Because of this problem, the Teteros family became the most determined anti-Bravos party. They repeatedly proposed to the parliament to declare war on Bravos, but they were repeatedly vetoed by Lord Illyrio and the Halkett family. This is why they finally turned against the Halkett family. Pull one against one. The people of Bravos are really dirty. Ian laughed secretly. He was originally wondering why Bravos didn't just send a fleet to quell the possible rebellion in Pentos. Now he understood that if they could use a little money that was insignificant to the Iron Bank to make the Pentos people fall into endless infighting, why would they need to use war? So, Butler Mills saw that Ian had no other questions and continued. The Halkett family and the Teteros family turned against each other, and the Bravos ambassador sponsored the prince's son Hasan Moharis to let him speak for Bravos in the governor's council. Then it became the situation you see today. In addition to our trade faction, Pentos also has the Volantis party and the Bravos party. So, when I start investigating, Prince Hasan Moharis or one of the 4 governors belonging to these two parties will become the enemy I need to face directly? Ian's attitude became more serious. Chapter 117. Strongman Belvis. 4. Butler Mills asked back. Governor Godding Halkett of the Bravos party, Governor Sisito Morn, Governor Grail Titulus and Governor Percy Rotulus of the Volantis party. Ian had a good memory and said their names directly. Oh no. Mills shook his head. Governor Percy Rotulus does not belong to the Volantis party. He just supports the war against Bravos, but has not accepted funding from any party. Then why does he support the war against Bravos? Ian asked strangely. Apart from personal interests, Ian could not think of any reason. Because his honor as a soldier and the honor of the Rotulus family as the old military nobles of Pentos do not allow him to fear. Military nobles? Ian discovered a new word, if I remember correctly. According to the agreement between Pentos and Bravos, Pentos cannot have more armed forces than the city guards. So why does Pentos still have so-called military nobles? The Rotulus family has a 700-year history. Of course, this may not be a big deal for you Westeros, isn't it? The Free family with an 800-year history is called an Alvorish, and our Derry family has a 6,000-year history. Ian complained in his heart. But in our Pentos, they are already the oldest family, and in the past few hundred years, nearly 1/3 of Pentos military commanders came from the Rotulus family. And now the commander-in-chief of the Pentos City Guard is Governor Percy Rotulus himself. Mills continued to explain. Let a certain governor take charge of Pentos defense? Ian was a little surprised. Can you rest assured about this? The Rotulus family respects tradition and has always been the most staunch defender of Pentos' parliamentary system. The old Governor Percy Rotulus himself is a fair, strict and respected elder. Let him command Pentos city guards, and everyone can rest assured, including Lord Illyrio. Mills emphasized at last. How many people are there in Pentos city guards? Ian thought for a moment and asked. In theory, it's 6,000 people. In theory, because Pentus can only retain the city guard, all our armed forces are counted into the city guard. This is certainly not taking advantage of a loophole, Mills explained, looking at Ian's meaningful expression. You have to know that Pentus is a city with a population of more than 500,000, and the surrounding vassal areas have a population of about 3.5 million to 5 million. A 6,000-man city guard is not excessive, and the people of Bravos have no objection to this. That's right, Ian nodded. Then why do you call it theoretical? Because in the long period of peace that followed, the Governor's Council found that it was not necessary to maintain such a standing force, so the number of city guards was gradually reduced to 2,000 in the following decades. These 2,000 people were divided into 4 banners, of which the first banner guard had 800 people, commanded by Governor Percy Rotulus himself. The other 3 banners belonged to the Bravos Party, the Volantis Party and our people. No wonder the original book mentioned that the governors of Pentus doubled the size of the city guard before Khal Drogo arrived in Pentus, and the Bravosi had no objection. It turned out that the military strength of Pentus itself was far lower than the size agreed in the agreement. Ian thought, is this all the military strength of Pentus? Ian asked. No, Mills shook his head. According to the provisions of the agreement, we still have a lot of military service quotas, and these quotas naturally cannot be wasted. So, the Governor's Council allocated 200 of the remaining 4,000 quotas to each of the 7 governors, allowing them to maintain their own private guards in the city, and the rest of the quotas were all sold. You know that the nobles of Pentus all have a lot of land outside the city, and those lands undoubtedly need to be protected and maintained in order, but the nobles' private armed forces are also considered Pentus armed forces in the eyes of the Bravosi, so their private soldiers all need to occupy quotas for the city guard. You are worthy of being called a free trade city. You can trade anything. So, how many places did the 3 governors buy? Ian asked immediately. He was referring to the core figures of the Bravos and Volantis factions. More than half. What the hell? But you don't have to worry. Their troops are not in Pentus. Except for Governor Ceciline Morn. The other 2 governors have less than 100 private guards in the city. In fact, there is no difference between 100 and 1,000 people to me. Anyway, they can't attack me openly. Ian shrugged. What I need to be wary of is sneak attacks. With me here, no one can sneak attack you. A voice suddenly sounded. Ian looked in the direction of the voice and found that the person who had just spoken was a big eunuch with brown skin who seemed to have just entered the room not long ago. The guy was sturdy, with arms as thick as tree trunks. His upper body was naked, revealing scars all over his chest and stomach, and an extremely long air-axe scimitar hung on his waist. This is Belvas, the mercenary sent to you by Lord Illyrio. Butler Mills introduced immediately. Mercenaries? Ian wanted to laugh for some reason. Well, Lord Illyrio really never got involved in the slave trade. Strongman Belvas. Ian remembered this guy, an elite gladiator who fought out of the great arena of Meereen. He was bought by Illyrio after traveling to Pentus. In the original book, he and Fearless Biristan were sent by Illyrio to Daenerys, who was still in Karth. This guy slaughtered the champion warriors of Meereen in an almost playful way under the city of Meereen. The TV series grafted this plot onto the leader of the Second Sons. After Daenerys occupied Meereen, he became a member of her Queen's Iron Guard. His strength was indeed beyond doubt. I have never lost a battle, until Belvas noticed Ian's gaze, and he called Ian like this. Every time I defeat my opponent, I give him a chance to cut me, he said, sticking out his belly, and I'm still alive today. With me here, no one can hurt you. Bivos added. I believe you, my friend. Ian nodded and said politely, I feel at ease with you around. The sturdy Bivos smiled. Very good. Then next is this one. Mills pointed to the boy next to Bivos who was not even as tall as his armpit. His name is Hazru. He can help you find out a lot of things. Ian nodded again. He knew that this should be the leader of Illyrio's little mice. Illyrio's little mice, like the little birds of Varys, the Minister of Intelligence in Westeros, are mostly made up of these wandering orphans. Chapter 118, Skin Changer Elementary. After bidding farewell to Butler Mills, Ian temporarily returned to his room on the pretext of carefully studying the merchant's information in his hand. After all, compared to a task that has been completed and only needs to be done for show, He is more eager to know whether he can get the bug of the optional task. A huge Dothraki army is approaching Pentus. If you can defeat them halfway, I will pay you this gold dragon as a reward. The selected task publisher is still the old toolman Luoer. He repeated this sentence at Ian's signal. If you can ensure that Pentus will not be captured by them this time, you have completed the task. This is the script that Ian thought of temporarily. It has the same logic as the mission of the Insider of the Chamber of Commerce. That is, the second goal of at least ensuring that Pentus will not be captured is also the purpose of the first goal of preventing the arrival of the Dothraki. Discovery trigger task, defend Pentus task description. Khal Drogo is leading a caravan with 40,000 roaring warriors to approach Pentus. Sir Luoer hopes that you can defeat them halfway, or at least ensure that Pentus will not be captured by them this time. Mission reward. 1 gold dragon additional reward, unknown, accept, consumes 1 point, reject, accepting. Complete optional mission for defend Pentus mission difficulty rating, medium mission reward. 1 gold dragon additional reward. 3 points, 3 attribute points, medium difficulty determination. Ian frowned immediately. With his current strength, defeating Khal Drogo's army is simply a fantasy. It should be determined as extremely difficult. As for the fact that this mission was completed directly, it was because Drogo came to marry a wife and had no intention of attacking Pentus at all. Its core logic is the same as the bug of the mission, the Insider of the Valyria Chamber of Commerce. But why was this mission also determined as medium? It doesn't make sense at all. Could it be that the optional mission itself only has a medium difficulty determination? Or was my previous speculation about the difficulty determination wrong? When determining such a mission, would it not only consider the first goal, defeat Drogo's army, but also consider the second goal, defend Pentus? If we take into account the high walls of Pentus and the lack of siege technology of the Dothraki, it is understandable that this task is judged as medium. However, this conclusion conflicts with the judgment of the previous task of the inner traitor of the Chamber of Commerce. Shaking his head, Ian temporarily suppressed his doubts. It is meaningless to guess randomly like this. Just test a few more groups. With more samples, the answer will naturally be found. Even if we can't find the answer, just rely on medium tasks. As long as we keep brushing, we can still get 10,000 points by writing 3,000 scripts. Next is, Ian told Luoer the content of the next script. I suspect that there is an inner traitor in the mercenary team under the strongman Belvis. They may pose a threat to you. If you can catch him, I will pay you this gold dragon as a reward. Luoer cooperated with ease. If you can guarantee that you will not be killed by the inner traitor next, you will also complete the task. Ian further simplified the task according to the same logic, which excluded variables such as the strength of Pentus itself compared to the previous task. Moreover, this task can also test whether there are any problems with Bevos's subordinates. Discovery of the triggering task, the inner ghost of Bevos's mercenary team. Task description, Luoer suspects that there is an inner ghost among Bevos's subordinates. He hopes that you can catch him, or at least ensure that you will not be killed by the inner ghost. Task reward. 1 gold dragon. Additional reward, unknown, accept, consumes 1 point, reject. Ian still clicked, accept, directly, but this time it was not the email of task completion that popped up, but a prompt box. Unacceptable. Prompt, the number of optional tasks accepted this month has reached the upper limit. Upper limit? Ian was stunned for a moment, and then remembered that he seemed to have only accepted 2 optional tasks from beginning to end last month. The truth of the death of the Black Falcon, and the Black Fire treasure, and did not trigger the prompt box of reaching the upper limit of the number of tasks, and this month he had already accepted 2 optional tasks. So the upper limit of accepting optional tasks each month is only 2, which is very troublesome. Ian started to think about it. According to his original idea, if he wanted to test the judgment rule of task difficulty, he would need to conduct dozens of experiments by controlling variables. The limit on the number of tasks each month makes such an experiment very luxurious, or even impossible to carry out. But if the experiment is not completed, when tasks like defeat Drogo's army are judged to be of medium difficulty, it is difficult for Ian to imagine what kind of script will be judged as extremely difficult. defeat the Night King. Or to be more straightforward, directly defeat the God of Cold? Maybe, but if you want to test it, you have to wait until at least next month. Forget it. Think about it on the bright side. Ian stopped speculating without evidence, although we have not been able to further test the rules for determining the difficulty of tasks. We only need to follow this template to write scripts, and there will be at least 2 guaranteed medium optional tasks every month. After stopping the test, Ian began to check his data card and counted his gains today. Ian, Strength 32, Agility 27, Mental Power 7 Skills, Etiquette Basics, Common Language Reading and Writing Basics, Advanced Swordsmanship, Advanced Horsemanship, Intermediate Lance, Skin Changer Basics Attribute Points. 6 Skill Points. 6 points. 35 items. Basic skill scroll of your choice. Without hesitation, Ian gave all 6 attribute points to his mental power, and then upgraded his skin changer basics to elementary. As soon as he finished adding points, a lot of knowledge flooded into Ian's mind. First of all, there are some warnings. The consciousness of skin changers is more likely to invade animals that are close to them. If the consciousness of the skin changer is lower than that of the animal it invades, the skin changer will be negatively affected. Human consciousness will have a negative impact on both parties, unless the mental power of the skin changer is much higher than that of the other party. If the skin changer invades the consciousness of an animal and the animal is killed, the skin changer will be severely damaged. If the skin changer's body is killed when invading the consciousness of an animal, part of his consciousness will remain in the creature. Then there are ways to feel the existence of one's own soul and control it, ways to invade the consciousness of an animal, and precautions for the first time to invade consciousness. Ian digested all the information carefully and concluded that the skin changer level could start to try to shift into animals close to him. So he found his squaw, the Dornishman Denzel, and asked him to go to the market to buy a few young eagles and cats. Then he began to look at the merchant information given to him by Illyrio's butler Mills. Chapter 119 Sky. In the following week, Ian investigated the slave ship and met with several merchants on the list. Finally, he submitted the conclusion that the slave ship with the insider does not exist to Illyrio. Although Ian knew the result, he knew that the investigation process was also the basis for Illyrio to further evaluate his value, so he did not really slack off, but handled all the details seriously. During this time of working together, Ian and Hasru, the leader of the Little Mice, developed a good friendship. Ian hoped that Hasru's intelligence network would play a role in his possible struggle with the players hidden in Pentus. After the investigation, Ian did not leave Illyrio's house until the end of the month. During this time, he continued to improve his swordsmanship and tried to become a real skin changer. Originally, Ian wanted to buy a young eagle to cultivate feelings from an early age, but the growth cycle of an eagle is not short, and Ian found that he could not afford such a time cost. So he finally chose to ask the Dornishman Denzel to buy a falcon that had been through a dealer's hands once and had lost most of its wildness, and planned to forcibly occupy its consciousness to change its shape. Unfortunately, his previous 2 attempts failed. Today, Ian was going to make a 3rd attempt. After breakfast, Ian came to the courtyard outside the dormitory and walked all the way to the marble pool in the middle of the courtyard surrounded by 6 cherry trees. In the middle of the pool was a statue of a naked boy holding a Bravus assassin's dagger in his hand, showing a posture of assassination. He was handsome and elegant, only about 16 years old, with shoulder-length blonde hair. Ian opened the cage, and a falcon immediately jumped out, trying to fly away. Unfortunately, there was a hemp rope tied to its claws, which held it tightly, making it unable to fly high, and finally it just landed on the shoulder of the painted statue in the middle of the pool. The falcon flapped its wings twice, and soon gave up struggling after finding that it was still bound, and became quiet. The next moment, the falcon and Ian rolled their eyes at the same time. Ian felt a tearing pain in his head, and then a feeling of consciousness leaving his body. Unlike the soul leaving his body that Ian knew, the moment Ian used alien magic to try to control the falcon, he lost all consciousness and fell into endless emptiness. Then he felt a force attacking him, and that force impacted his consciousness, as if trying to defeat his will. Soon, his consciousness began to become blurred. Ian knew that this was the resistance of the falcon's consciousness. He stopped at this step the first time. The first time, Ian felt the most intense resistance. Because he was afraid that holding on would cause damage to his spirit, his first attack was just a taste. The second time, the resistance of the Falcon's consciousness was obviously much weaker than the first time. Although it was still very strong, it lacked the feeling of preferring to die in glory rather than live in disgrace the first time. This time, the resistance of the Falcon's consciousness almost only stayed on defense, and it seemed to be waiting for Ian to retreat on his own initiative. But Ian didn't retreat this time. He endured the severe pain, adhered to his human nature, and launched an attack that was several times more fierce than before. Doubt, fear, and trembling Falcon's last emotions gradually entered Ian's soul. He felt himself melting into a vast white unknown. The chaos came to an abrupt end, and Ian found that the will to resist had disappeared. Falcon's remaining consciousness surrendered to him. Gradually, Ian's perception began to recover. First the sense of touch, then the sense of hearing and smell, and finally the sense of sight. Ian Falcon stood on the shoulder of the assassin statue, and its eyes regained clarity. Ian adapted to the new vision, and everything became particularly clear in his eyes. He looked straight ahead, and saw the small insects on the leaves more than 10 meters away. He looked at Keith in the courtyard, and found that their movements were as slow motion. Finally, he saw himself standing on the edge of the pool, rolling his eyes with the support of roll. At this moment, he felt that deep in his consciousness, he still had the perception of his original body, but it was very weak. Cut the rope, Ian ordered in a low voice. He found that he could still control his main body. He could not control the activities of two bodies at the same time for the time being, but he could switch freely. After receiving Ian's order, Keith acted decisively and cut the hemp rope tied to the Falcon's legs. The next moment, Ian Falcon flapped his wings again, soared into the sky, and flew into the sky. The Falcon accelerated very quickly. Ian felt that he was hundreds of meters high in the blink of an eye. Fly? This is the feeling of flying? I'm flying. The Falcon controlled by Ian flapped its wings happily and flew higher into the sky. This feeling of breaking free from all constraints. In an instant, Ian seemed to have thrown all the pressure behind his mind. All he thought about was freedom and flying. Higher, higher. He flapped his wings through the clouds and climbed to a higher sky. That was the sun. It turned out that the sun seen from this angle was so magnificent. Wait, the sun? What am I doing? Shit. The moment he saw the sun, Ian finally regained consciousness and broke free from this unprecedented weird state, because at the moment he was bathed in the sun, he suddenly thought of the story of Icarus's wings. This made him horrified, and he turned his head and dived below the clouds. Of course, the most important thing is not to possess birds. They are the worst. People should not leave the earth. If you stay in the clouds for a long time, you will no longer want to come down. The feeling of flying is extremely fascinating. I know some skin changers have tried eagles, owls, and crows. When they return to their original bodies, they will also become dazed and stare at the unfortunate blue sky endlessly. The content of the memory brought by the skin changer's skills once again surfaced in Ian's mind. Just a moment, was it almost out of control? Flying steadily over Pentus, Ian felt a sense of surviving a disaster. Wait, what the hell is surviving a disaster? I'm a falcon now. My wings are real wings, not feathers made of beeswax. They will not melt due to high temperature. Ian suddenly thought absurdly. The next moment, Ian once again felt absurd about his previous thoughts, because this is not the world of Greek mythology. Even if he is now flying thousands of meters high, he is not really close to the sun. The temperature here is not rising, but extremely cold. What happened to me? Because my consciousness entered the body of the eagle, did my brain become dull? Not daring to stay in the body of the eagle any longer, Ian quickly flew back to his own courtyard, returned his consciousness to his original body, and hastily ended the state of shaper shifting. In just a few minutes, he already felt that his spirit was under great pressure. He needed to rest. Chapter 122nd Month-End Settlement. After completing the first transformation, Ian went back to his bedroom tired and took a nap. It was not until the ghost hour in the middle of the night that Luo woke him up according to Ian's instructions, because today was the second month's settlement day. When 12 o'clock in the morning came, the auxiliary system sounded a reminder on time. Ian closed his eyes and logged into the system and began to check the email. 61st day settlement report. Current number of remaining players. 33. Ian vaguely remembered that the number of remaining players had reached this number more than half a month ago. After such a long time, no new players were eliminated. In this regard, Ian had two guesses. One is that the remaining players are indeed scattered, and there is no chance of confrontation. Although the treasure chests of Volantis and Xia Ze have not been found, there are probably not many players there. The second is that most of the remaining players already have some points in their hands. They know that they will not be selected by the assassination mechanism of the scoreboard, so they become less aggressive and adventurous in the confrontation. But in any case, according to the experience of the last time, this number will soon become 30. Without too much entanglement, Ian clicked on the second email. Congratulations to the player who ranked first on the second month's settlement day. Player awards. 10 points, 1888 gold dragons, 1, in the region, self-selected S-level NPC, the updated data card is, Ian, strength 32, agility 27, mental strength 13 skills, etiquette basics, common language reading and writing basics. Advanced swordsmanship, advanced horsemanship, intermediate lance, elementary skin changer attribute points. 0 skill points. 5 points. 45 items. Basic skill self-selected scroll nice. Ian snapped his fingers. Although he only earned a single-digit number of points this month, and his total points at the settlement were only 35, he still retained the first place in the scoreboard when other players could not find a way to brush up their points. After all, the main quests are incredibly difficult, and the optional quests are limited to 2 per month. At this stage, the biggest part of players brushing up their points is hunting players, but there are not many players to kill in the second month. It was not unexpected for Ian to remain in the first place. What really surprised him was that the settlement rewards for the second month were increased compared to the first month. Last month, the first place got 5 points, 888 gold dragons and 2 A-level NPCs, but this month it increased to 10 points, 1888 gold dragons, and 1 S-level NPC. Although these resources are just icing on the cake for Ian now, the increase in rewards is extremely tempting. What will it be next month? What about the month after that? It can be said that this ranking mechanism has taken the Matthew effect to the extreme. Whoever has, will be given double, making him redundant. Whoever does not have, even what he has, will be taken away. After a short while of excitement, Ian began to receive the prize. As before, there are still 3 cards for the self-selected NPCs in the area. Bravus Water Dancer, Strength 31 to 36, Agility 38 to 46, Spirit 0 to 6 skills, Mastery of Sword, Elementary Riding, and then other skills equipment. Bravus Rapier, Water Dancer Kendo Uniform. Unsullied Lancer, Strength 28 to 35, Agility 37 to 48, Spirit 0 to 6 skills, Intermediate Sword, Mastery of Lancer, Advanced Throwing, Intermediate Array Command Special Ability, Fearlessness, Not Afraid of Any Pain, Equipment, Leather Armor. Combat Spear, Phalanx Lance, Throwing Spear, Leather Round Shield, Koha Black Goat Temple Cavalry, Strength 32 to 40, Agility 28 to 35, Spirit 4 to 8 skills, Advanced Scimitar, Advanced Hammer, Advanced Riding, Intermediate Lance Equipment, Koha Scimitar. Mace, Koha Black Goat Armor, Heavy Warhorse. I have to say, the system NPC rewards are really conscientious. Ian couldn't help but sigh, and then analyze the 3 units. First, the Water Dancer of Bravus, whose strength is relatively weak among S-level units, but the maximum agility limit is as high as 46. You should know that the agility of Roll and Kez is only over 30, and Ian already thinks that they are incredibly fast in sword drawing. What level is 46 plus? Ian subconsciously thought of a Baron Martel, the red VIP who used a spear to play with the mountain. That was probably the extreme level of agility. But as for the equipment, the equipment of the Water Dancer is indeed a little too simple. Ian smiled bitterly. Then there is the Unsullied Spearmaster, the plus version of the Unsullied. Ian has analyzed the Unsullied before, and the value of a single one is not great, so it can be directly excluded. Finally, there is the Black Goat Temple Cavalry of Koha. Looking at the preview image on the system interface, Ian couldn't help but exclaimed. Although he had long known that Koha's smelting technology was world famous, he really didn't expect it to be so outrageous. The most intuitive first feeling that this Black Goat Temple Cavalry gave him was, isn't this the Goat Cavalry of the Iron Hills dwarves in The Hobbit? The only difference between the two is that the cavalry of the Iron Hills is dwarves riding goats, while the cavalry of Koha is goats riding horses. Ugh. It's humans wearing black goat helmets riding horses. Just looking at this preview image, Ian can feel a sense of oppression coming at him. But looking at this information, Ian struggled for a long time, and finally chose the Bravas Water Dancer. Although he was very curious about the level of armor that the Koha people, who claimed to have the top forging technology in the world of ice and fire, could make for their temple cavalry, at this moment, he obviously had to choose the Bravas Water Dancer to maximize his benefits. After all these professions had to be rearmed by Ian to conceal their identities after they came to Ian. Without this set of armor, the Black Sheep Cavalry was obviously not that valuable. After making the decision, Ian would start preparing to draw cards. This was an exciting moment. For the non-Africans, the reward for an S card might be a swordsman, while for the European Emperor, if the skill level deviated a little bit, he might get a Sirio Full, Jade Emperor, Taishang Laochen, Jesus Christ, Tathagata Buddha, Three-Eyed Raven, King of Light, Thousand-Faced God, Black Goat, Horse God, Supreme Shepherd, Night Lion, Night King. Please bless me to draw the highest attribute configuration. As soon as Ian finished speaking, he immediately pressed the confirm button on the system interface. Soon, new results came out again. Yada more, Strength 34, Agility 45, Mental Strength 4 skills, Swordmaster, Elementary Riding, Intermediate Valyrian Equipment, Bravas Rapier, Water Dancer Kendo Uniform. Awesome. Ian clenched his left fist and smashed it into the palm of his right hand. Both strength and agility attributes are over the center line, and the swordsmanship skills are still master level. Another super standard person like Kez. RVS level trained by the organizers really the top in the profession? Peas. The Black Goat is the god of Koha, and the Black Goat Temple Cavalry is not the content of the original work, but the name given to the Koha heavy cavalry in this book, which belongs to the secondary creation part. Chapter 121 Battle. With the arrival of a new month, the 3-month anti-slavery campaign in Pentus finally ended, and Ian also received his 500 gold dragons of activity funds left over from Illyria as promised. But to Ian's surprise, the factional struggle in Pentus did not ease with the end of the anti-slavery campaign, but instead became more and more intense. After Prince Hazan, Governor Halkett and Governor Teteris had a failed meeting in the Red Temple, Prince Hazan and Governor Halkett's daughter, Delith Halkett, announced their wedding date. Before the Iron Bank offered the Halkett family double the price to win them over to the Bravas party. The Halkett family had always been a close ally of the Teteris family, and Delith Halkett had been engaged to Governor Teteris's third son, Suda Teteris, since childhood. The unilateral breach of contract by the Hawcott family and the fact that Delith quickly fell into the arms of Prince Hazan completely ignited the anger of Suda Teteris. Shortly after Prince Hazan's wedding date was announced, Suda and several companions came to the Great Red Temple on the top of the mountain in Pentus City and swore to kill Hazan in front of the fiery Red Heart and a group of priests. Unfortunately, before Suda could act, he was captured by the eldest son of Governor Teteris, who rushed to the temple after hearing the news. The matter has come to an end for the time being, but how it will end is still unknown. These news were shared with Ian by Hasru, the leader of the Little Mouse. Ian gave him a nickname called Big Mouse for the time being. After this period of getting along, he has regarded Ian as a friend. Today he came to Illyrio's mansion to report his work to Illyrio, and after finishing, he shared lunch with Ian and others. During the dinner, Steward Mills also expressed his opinion on the matter. He told Ian that Governor Teteris was not a person who would easily suffer a loss. After being humiliated this time, Governor Teteris would definitely take greater action. to retaliate against the Bravos party and even Prince Xia himself. Steward Mills's guess was soon confirmed. On the second day after Suda Teteris was taken home by his eldest brother, with the approval of Governor Teteris, Suda Teteris formally invited Prince Xia to hold a tournament. The rules are that both sides will send 7 people, including Suda Teteris and Prince Xia himself, to participate in the battle, and the game will be a one-on-one life and death duel. The winner of each single game can be replaced to rest, but must continue to fight in the future. The competition will continue until all contestants on one side are killed in battle. After the game, the governor of the losing side needs to publicly apologize to the winner at the Great Council. This proposal is very beneficial to Teteris, because the ally of Teteris' family, Governor Sisito Morn, who is also a slave trader of the Volantis party, has a large number of slave warriors, several of whom are even champion gladiators of Meereen. According to this rule, Prince Xia has almost no chance of winning. But I don't know if it's the man's desire to win or lose that is at work. Prince Xia seems unwilling to admit defeat in front of his fiancé's ex-fiancé. After persuading his father and future father-in-law, Governor Haukat, he chose to fight openly, and the condition was to set the date of the competition in a month, and he needed time to prepare. In this way, the city of Pentus began to be shrouded in a deeper cloud. Ian was also shrouded in the cloud, because 1 month later is a day when the Horse King arrives in Pentus. Although there is little description of Pentus in the original book, if the Horse King arrives, it will be the first POV chapter of Daenerys. If such a grand tournament was taking place in Pentus at the same time as the Horse King's banquet, it is impossible that no one would say a word about it. In other words, in the current timeline, some players have exerted influence on the factional struggle in Pentus, triggering a butterfly effect, which led to the appearance of this tournament. Of course, this does not mean that the players are the big bosses behind the scenes. Perhaps they just play the role of speculators like Littlefinger, or have influenced these Pentus bigwigs in some other way. But in any case, this is a place worth being vigilant. Unfortunately, even though Ian has established a good relationship with the largest intelligence network in Pentus, he still can't find a clue to catch other players. So in the following time, he could only ask Bagrat Hasru to help him investigate whether there are any characters who have appeared in Pentus in the past 2 months, while continuing to practice the skills of the skin changer and improve his strength. During this period, Ian also asked Illyrio to follow him to attend his banquets, in order to find a way to get to know the Bravos ambassador and the person in charge of the Iron Bank in Pentus, but was rejected by Illyrio. Ian really couldn't refute the reason for Illyrio's refusal, because he said, Viserys would not want his first vassal to be my subordinate. Obviously Illyrio was right. If Ian followed Illyrio to Pentus, and ran around here openly, before pledging allegiance to Viserys, if the news reached Viserys' ears, who knows how angry the eccentric sleeping dragon would be. Ian didn't want to take this risk, so he gave up this plan, and began to improve his strength with peace of mind. Half a month passed in a flash, with the news that a Dothraki callus with a force of 100,000 people crossed the Rhoyne River through Nassau and entered the Great Plains. The atmosphere in Pentus began to become tense. Listen to Bagrat Hasru, it is now spreading in the streets and alleys. People say that at this moment, the largest callus in history is heading towards Pentus, and the powerful Khal Drogo is here to marry the last princess of the King of the West. There are many different opinions about the exact size of the Cararess. Some say that there are 40,000 Beltai warriors. According to the Dothraki custom, only those who win a battle can tie a bell. 1 bell is added for each victory, and hair is cut off for defeat, and the other tribes, women, and slaves add up to 100,000 people. Others say that 100,000 is actually the number of Beltai warriors, and the total number of the entire Cararess exceeds 500,000, and even 2 million is not a small number. In order to welcome this friend, the Governor's Council quickly passed a resolution to recruit mercenaries to temporarily double the city guard. However, after doing so, the actual strength of Pentus will exceed the 6,000 agreed with Bravos. In order to get the support of Bravos Ambassador Oranto, the Governor's Council finally reached a compromise, allowing the temporary addition of 2,000 mercenaries to be commanded by 3 commanders. They are Prince Hazan of the Bravos party, a confidant of Illyrio who leans towards the Bravos position, and Governor Tityrus of the Volantis party. It is worth mentioning that when Ian was scouting Pentis in eagle form, he discovered that the Black Falcon mercenary group, which he had deployed in Pentis and had never contacted, also took private jobs and joined Pentis City Guard. Chapter 122, Loris Merchant. Dear Hand of Shilla, my old friend, after this period of hard work, I have found the most suitable candidate to be our eyes, Jorah Mormont, the Earl of Bear Island, who was sentenced to death by Eddard Stark for selling poachers to slave traders. Robert promised him a pardon, and I promised him something else that is more important to him. You don't have to worry about him doing anything bad to Viserys and the others. In short, after sending Jorah, Robert should not send other assassins in a short time, which is enough for us to delay time until the wedding of the Horse King. And after Her Royal Highness marries Khal Drogo, the new assassins sent by Robert, whether they succeed or not, will anger Khal Drogo and make Drogo firm in his belief in sending troops to Westeros. As for the other thing you said, immediately introduce Ian Rivers to Little Griffin, alias of Rhaegar's son, false, Aegon VI, and let him follow Griffin, alias of John Connington, who was once the King's Hand of the Mad King, a close friend of Rhaegar, and now responsible for teaching Aegon VI directly. I don't agree with this plan, although it would be of great benefit to our plan to let this young man you admire establish friendship with Little Griffin as soon as possible. But now it is known that the descendants of the Derry family and the Grayson family have gone to Pentis to join Viserys. At this time, you prevented them from coming to Viserys and sent them to other places, which would inevitably arouse suspicion. Besides, you know Viserys' character. Anyone who sees him in person will be greatly disappointed. As long as that Sarian is really smart, even if he has followed Viserys for a while, he will definitely switch to the Wise Master without hesitation after we put Little Griffin in the open. I hope you will seriously consider my suggestion. Pendant box. After writing the letter, Varys cut off a small piece of wax, melted it with a spoon over a candle, poured it on the envelope, and stamped it with the seal with the octopus spider. The Hand of Sheila and the pendant box are the secret names used by Illyrio and Varys in their correspondence. They come from Illyrio's late wife, a lies prostitute named Sheila. After Sheila's death, Illyrio kept one of her hands to commemorate his lost love and put her portrait in an exquisite pendant box. These two items have been kept by Illyrio. Jorah, you will take the ship to Pentis now and give it to Magister Illyrio. Varys handed the sealed letter to Jorah Mormont. Illyrio will tell you the specific arrangements later. The tall knight took the envelope and responded with a nasal voice. On his arrogant face, Varys could clearly see his disdain for himself. But Varys didn't care at all. He just smiled and said, by the way, if your assassination operation has not made any progress, Robert may try to send other assassins. Remember, the Targaryen brothers and sisters must not be in trouble. You also remember our agreement. Mormont did not answer Varys, but just reminded him, and left in a hurry. That's it. The Bagrat Hasru handed a thick stack of letters to Ian. This is the information we spent a long time collecting. It's the information of people who have only arrived in Pentis in the past 2 months, but their power has developed rapidly. 106 people. Ian's mouth twitched. Why don't you add 2 more to make it 108 heroes? We have tried our best, Hasru said helplessly. He thought Ian thought it was too little. Of course, I can see it. Ian laughed awkwardly. This list was too outrageous. It seemed as if they had found all the people who slightly met the characteristics he mentioned. As expected of Illyrio's intelligence network in Pentis, Ian was basically certain that there were definitely players or agents pushed out by players. But with so many people, the difficulty of his verification also increased. Moreover, this list did not include those players who might have managed to replace someone who was originally a Pentosian. Tell me about the interesting things that happened in Pentis recently. Ian found that Hasru was sitting there alone and bored while he was reading the information, so he spoke. Hasru immediately started to talk non-stop as soon as he heard it. Most of the interesting things were about the newly added city guards in Pentis. These mercenaries who smelled the smell of money and poured into Pentis made the city a mess. This made Ian feel ridiculous because increasing the city guards was itself a superficial self-consolation. If Drogo's card LS was hostile to Pentus, even if Pentus increased the guards tenfold, it would be useless. Of course, this did not mean that Drogo could attack the city of Pentus. On the contrary, the Dothraki had no siege weapons or siege warfare experience. Even if Pentus did not increase its guards, Drogo would not be able to capture the walls of Pentus. But unlike the normal countries with cities and castles in Ian's previous life, the free cities, which developed from a large piece of land to support a huge city, were powerless to resist the Dothraki who had no siege capability. Only when a country has enough cities and military towns will the nomads be cautious about in-depth destruction and plunder. They need to worry that the defenders of the cities behind them, that have not been conquered, will come out to stab their asses. There are almost no cities and castles outside the free cities, so Drogo can easily pour out his anger on the villages and towns in the vast land east of Pentus. He can turn the land south of the Velvet Mountains and west of the Little Rhoyne River into scorched earth. After losing the support of millions of farmers on the Great Plains, Pentus will fall into chaos and decline even without Drogo's siege. So the people of Pentus actually have only two choices in front of the Dothraki: defeat the Dothraki through field battles, or pay protection fees honestly. There is no point in increasing the city defense army, because there will be no siege at all. Ian thought while continuing to look through the information in his hand. Suddenly, the appearance of a name almost made Ian jump up from his chair. Ginny Tamari, a merchant from Loras, came to Pentus 2.5 months ago and made a small fortune in the port with his small gang through some shady means. Soon, they used this money to generate a larger fortune and even formed a large mercenary team. Suspicious point: several Westeros who tried to visit Governor Illyrio died strangely after being driven away, and this merchant and his companions were always near the scene of death. Current location: unknown. The last public appearance of this person was half a month ago, at the Red Temple on the top of Mount Pentus. This resume, isn't it a player? And it's a player from the same country as himself. Ian pulled this piece of paper out of a pile of information. But, this little black guy is so arrogant, and he didn't even bring me along. Isn't he afraid of a critical attack from a true fan like me? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123: The Weird Player, Part 1. Khal Drogo arrived much earlier than Ian expected. Before the end of this month, his personal guards had already appeared at the gates of Pentus. After asking around, Ian learned that, when Drogo was halfway through the Great Plains in his KLSA, he temporarily abandoned most of his people, and came here with only 300 personal guards. This morning, Pentus held a grand entry ceremony for Khal Drogo. If someone didn't know the inside story, at first glance, the scene would have been mistaken for a conqueror. After lunch, Illyrio sent his steward Mills to inform Ian that Drogo would host a banquet for all the upper nobles of Pentus in 3 days, and King Viserys would also attend, so that Ian could prepare to swear allegiance. Ian had no objection. After all, he had been waiting for this day for a long time. The double happiness was that the Bagrat Hasru came to visit that night and told Ian that he brought more complete clues about Ginny Tem. Since Ian found this player in Hasru's intelligence last week, he asked Hasru to find him. But Hasru failed, so Ian could only settle for the next best thing, hoping that he would find all the clues that Ginny Tem had previously been involved in Pentus. To be honest, Ian still hasn't figured out why the player chose such a name. If this were an esports game, it would be normal to be naughty like this. But a player who participated in the Battle Royale game, and a player who stood out in Pentus, where there were the most players at the beginning, and made it into the top 30, Ian couldn't understand that he did this kind of self-destruction just for the sake of being naughty. Generally speaking, a striking name has only two purposes. Either it is a signal to call teammates, or it is a trap. But the name Ginny Tem is not the best solution for both purposes. After all, if it is used as a signal to call agreed teammates, he can choose a code that only his own people know, instead of such a hot topic. If it is a trap, to lure people into the net, He should choose something more universal and global, instead of pitting only his own people like this. In addition, another point worth being vigilant about is that the last time this person appeared was at the Red Temple on the top of the mountain in Pentus. And the time was exactly the same day that the son of Governor Tetris, the green turtle Suda Tetris, appeared in the temple and vowed to kill Prince Hazen. This made Ian wonder if the factor that led to the intensification of the party struggle in Pentus was this person. If so, then such a guy with an unpredictable style of behavior and the ability to incite is undoubtedly a difficult opponent. If possible, Ian hopes to take advantage of the home advantage brought by Valyria in Pentus to bury this trouble forever. Otherwise, letting this person live may cause endless troubles. Back in the reception room of the house, Ian asked the servants to bring some fruits, and then officially started a conversation with Hasru. "You have to thank me, Ian. We spent a lot of effort on your matter." Hasru sat on the velvet-filled sofa chair and ate the fruit without hesitation. "It's Darren's matter. I was exhausted trying to help him." Ian shrugged. This was his excuse. After all, compared to Ian Rivers, who was only 16 years old and had always stayed in Westeros, it was normal for Darren Grafson, who was 25 years old and had sailed to many cities, to have such an enemy of Loras named Ginny Tame. What he was using now was Illyrio's intelligence network. Although Illyrio never asked about his personal relationship with Hasru, what he did had to be logical in Illyrio's eyes. "I don't care. I don't know any Darren Grafson. I'm helping you. I wouldn't go to such great lengths for someone else. Of course, I owe you a favor, my friend," Ian said sincerely. "Well, can we get to the point?" Darren has been unable to sleep well since he knew that Ginny Tame had also arrived in Pentus. As his friend, I have to find a way to help him solve this problem. "Is that Loras man so scary?" Hasru muttered. "He looks very thin." "Thin? Can you describe his appearance in detail?" Ian asked quickly. "No," Hasru shook his head. "No one has ever seen his face. Every time he appears, he is wrapped in a black robe. We only heard that he is very thin." "Then how did you determine that the person who appeared in the Red Temple for the last time was him?" "He said so himself." "He said so himself?" "At that time, he went to the Red Temple to confess and told the priestess on duty his name. The priestess on duty thought that what he said was too bizarre, so she shared it with a group of priests, including our people." "What the hell? A player ran to confess to the priestess of the Red God? What kind of fairy plot?" "What did he say?" Ian asked hurriedly. "He said that he shouldn't have touched that basketball." Hasru said an unfamiliar word unskillfully. "What the fuck?" Exclamation mark. Ian's heart was instantly filled with 1,000 grass mud horses running. If he didn't know that Hasru was definitely an aboriginal, he really suspected that this little bastard was playing a trick on him. So the last time that player appeared was just to tell the priestess of the Red God that he shouldn't have touched the basketball? What the hell is this? Ian really felt that his brain was not enough. No matter what level the other players he met were, at least they did normal things. But what about this guy? What was his purpose? What was his logic? Was it a provocation? The next moment Ian had a guess. Could it be that there was another player chasing him at the time, so he showed up to play a meme to mock the pursuer? In this case, although his behavior was irrational, it was at least not completely illogical. Go back and ask your people to ask the priests again to see if anyone has asked her about this matter about Ginny Tame before you, Ian said to Hasru. If so, it means that his guess is correct. There is another powerful player force in the city of Pentus, and their relationship with Ginny Tame is hostile. Okay. Hasru nodded. Then go ahead and tell me all the information you have found. The name Ginny Tame first appeared in Pentus on the bounty of the Coma Inn, which was nearly 3 months ago, probably in early October. When the game was first launched, Ian made a mental judgment and asked, where is the Coma Inn? Chapter 124 The Weird Player, Part 2. The Coma Inn is located in the lower city, and has been open in Pentus for many years. The Bigrad Hasru introduced. Originally, this inn was not outstanding, but last year, a boss with a wide network of connections bought it, and provided a service in the tavern, to help mercenaries find work. Due to the extremely high efficiency of the Jummarin, in less than half a year, it became the largest mercenary activity venue in Pentus, and even had a nickname of the Mercenary Guild. It looked like a player's work, but it was too early. Ian shook his head secretly. So the mysterious boss. He is Suda Teterus, the third son of Governor Teterus. He was the one whose fiancé was robbed by Prince Hazan, and then he challenged Hazan to a martial arts competition. Hasru answered. Green-haired turtle Ian nodded to Hasru, motioning him to continue. The earliest trace of Jinitame's activities that we found in Pentus appeared in this inn. Hasru immediately changed the subject back. He posted a quest in the Jummarin at that time. Do you know the content? I don't know. Hasru shook his head. It was just a very ordinary quest, inconspicuous in the Jummarin. If it weren't for the fact that the name of the publisher of the quest, Jinitame, had no meaning in Valyrian and the boss hadn't taken a closer look at it, I'm afraid no one would have noticed such a quest at all. If among the many bounty quests in the Jummarin there is only one quest whose publisher's name spelled in Valyrian sounds very similar to Jinitame, we should be able to rule out the possibility of phishing. Its audience is too small. The number of Chinese players who participated in this game was less than 1/5 of the total number of players. He also had to know this joke, and happened to start in Pentus, and happened to come to the Kyomarin, and see this name. Even at this point, seeing this name spelled in the Wa language may not be able to react. Even if Jiang Taegan was given this fish, he couldn't catch it. So, is this really the code agreed upon by Tamo's allies? Who took the task in the end? Ian asked immediately. No one. A week later, Jinitame returned to the Kyomarin and cancelled the task with the boss. Of course, the deposit cannot be refunded for cancellation without a legitimate reason like this. How much deposit did he pay? What is the bounty of the task? The deposit is 1/3 of the bounty of the task, 2 gold dragons. Hasru replied. Invalid information. There are too many professions that can take out 2 gold dragons at the beginning, and it is impossible to judge this person's starting profession based on this. What happened next? The last time this name appeared was in the most recent Red Temple, but the first information you gave me said that he and his gang made a fortune. Ian asked in confusion. Yes, but he was no longer called Jinitame at that time. What? In just 1 month, Jinitame changed 3 names. We didn't know what his real name was, so we chose the first name he used. But from the reaction of your friend Darren Grafson, Jinitame is his real name, isn't it? Ian touched his nose. Changing 3 names in 1 month. How could this operation sound so similar to someone? But, since no one has seen his appearance and he changed his name, how do you know that this person is his? Hasru suddenly showed a smug expression. Ian, you know, the owner of the Jummarin, Suda Teterus, is a member of the Volantis party. He made such a big move in the city of Pentus, and Governor Valyria couldn't help but be on guard. The Jummarin has always been the focus of our surveillance, so we have deployed more people around it. And just by coincidence, after Jinitame cancelled the mission at the Jummarin and took away the bounty he issued, our people saw him reuniting with a swordsman named Main Shah on the neighboring street. And then Main Shah appeared in a new gang. The boss of the new gang usually wears a mask. Judging from his figure, that person should be Jinitame without a doubt. Awesome. Ian's scalp suddenly tingled, and he couldn't help but begin to be glad that his previous series of operations were carried out at a crossroads where no one paid attention. So, what's next? Then, as written in the report, Tamoy used a series of means to make money and develop power in the port. Of course, after this period of in-depth investigation, we have discovered some new things. For example, a hired knight in Tamoy's gang once tried to meet Lord Delirio, but was directly rejected by the guards of the mansion. This is too normal. Which player who starts the game in Pentus doesn't come for the Dragon Queen? Ian complained in his heart. You may not know that there was a period of time before when a large number of noble knights from Westeros visited Lord Delirio's various properties, saying that they were coming to seek refuge with the beggars. Hasru paused, swallowed the rest of the pronunciation, looked at Ian, and saw that he was not angry, then continued. They came to seek refuge with His Majesty Viserys, and their tricks were endless, and they tried desperately to prove their worth, but unfortunately they could not pass the test of Steward Mills. No, I knew it when I just came to Pentus and the Unsullied guarding the gate of your house pointed a spear at my nose. And after those speculators were ejected, for some reason, a lot of conflicts occurred among them. The speculators hunted each other and created a large number of murders in a very short period of time. It was also during that period that Tamo's gang took advantage of Pentus's anti-slavery operation and became the knife of the Halkett family and grew rapidly. If the situation continues to develop like this, how can you not find them? Ian smiled. They rose quickly, but fell even faster. This is how small gangs are. Hasru shrugged, his expression full of disdain. In late October, they suffered a fatal blow. Their opponents took advantage of Governor Teterus's counterattack against the anti-slavery operation and brought disaster to Tamo's gang overnight. After that, Tamo's gang disappeared and Tamo himself was missing until he appeared in the Red Temple. Without sufficient strength, he suffered a devastating blow because of exposing his identity as a player. After disappearing for more than a month, he suddenly appeared in the Red Temple and exposed his identity again. This is not a fantasy world. You broke through the realm and ran out to announce the return of the king. What's wrong? Ian shook his head. It was too ridiculous. Regardless of whether Tamo had anything to do with Suda Teterus, his self-exposure in the Red Temple was too ridiculous. There must be something else hidden in it. We have to find a way to investigate it more carefully. Let's talk about his enemies. What about the group that pushed Tamo and his team into a desperate situation? Ian temporarily put aside his thoughts on Tamo's problem and asked about another player group. After all players are enemies. PS. I thought this was already a consolation push before the release, but I didn't expect it to be promoted. Now the earliest it will be released will be the 1st of next month. Chapter 125 asking for leave. I'm going to take a day off. Happy New Year everyone. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.